Supremacy Games. Chapter 136 to 150. Chapter 136, The First Walls Shuffle. If Felix had his attention on her, those pathetic attempts to take advantage of him would not be missed by him. However, his focus was entirely on the walls around him. How could he miss this chance to mark new prey without wasting his mental energy? You focus on that direction. He pointed a finger at his back without turning his head. Charming Sky understood what he meant and fixed her head in that direction. Their heads might be frozen in the shuffle, but their eyes were free to roam. Peep! The moment that last alert was heard, the maze rumbled akin to a 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck its core. The walls which were towering over them kept shaking as they split up into multiple parts. Each one moved in a different direction and got affixed with other parts, creating a new wall that led to a totally new direction. Felix and Charming Sky stood like ants between those behemoths moving around in a specific order. Suddenly their eyes widened in horror, as two parts of the wall were heading towards them without any plans to change direction. They were going to get sandwiched by them. Felix, I never thought you would die like this. Even in this messed up situation, Asna didn't forget to take jabs at him. Felix, uncaring about her mocking tone, kept staring at the wall that was closing in with his heart about to leap out of his throat. *CK. Just as the wall was about to make contact with his face, his body turned illusionary, bypassing the wall in one piece unharmed. The audience and Zoe laughed at this sight that was happening all over the maze. Felix shouldn't feel that bad, as some players teared up or even pissed their pants in fear of being squashed to paste by two walls. Not a bad prank, honesty. Instead of being furious at being played like this, Felix just chuckled in his mind. For Felix, who pranked his cousins at least hundreds of times in his childhood, this meant that he was more tolerant to others pranking him as well. He wasn't a crybaby to throw a tantrum over such a harmless prank, especially when he did the same to others. That being said, Felix's reaction was an exception, as those players, who were publicly humiliated, did not see Zoe's prank in a favorable manner. Each one of them had their own way of getting their revenge. The first and most straightforward method was to deny her interview after the game ends. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number _482634208264075517 for visiting. Zoe had no idea that her prank had just resulted in creating mass enmity. She didn't inform them about their bodies turning illusionary, so she could display this sign to the spectators. In her mind, it was simply a harmless prank to bring some laughs. Too bad, she underestimated the reaction of the players. It was beyond her wildest dreams that some players would actually piss themselves due to horror. But who could blame them? To see yourself getting turned into a paste without the ability to move or the luxury to scream was a fate far worse than falling off a cliff. Haha. Felix, you should have seen that man in front of us, he was really crying his eyes out. Asna guffawed as she rolled on the bed. Being reminded of so, Felix turned off his infrared vision to be able to see the faces of players within his line of sight. After all, his passive showed him only black and white colors. It wasn't optimal in this scenario. 12 players, 3 partners. I.P.S, and 2 alliances. He swiftly figured out the composition of those 12 players in front of him. Every 2 players marked a partnership and 3 players or above marked an alliance. Not a single one of them was going solo. At this point in the game, meeting up with at least one player was normal. Since this game supported alliances, there was no reason not to group up and kill beasts together. As long as the exit was not found, the partners. I.P.S were as solid as a rock. Just like Felix sizing them up, they were also doing the same. The only difference was that Felix had absolutely no clue about their names, while they had instantly recognized him. His hoodie with that smirky emoji gave him away. Regardless of being close to him, no one had the thought of meeting up or challenging him. They would be glad if he treated their existence like dirt and ignored them. They just wanted to hunt rare beasts peacefully. But one of them had a totally different approach, as she fixated her delighted eyes on Felix. Hehe, let's see if you are going to reject me again. Master Mania. A beautiful lady with shoulder-length silky smooth black hair and wearing a tight purple leather outfit smirked in her mind. She tried to look behind her back to gaze at Master Mania, who stood with focused eyes at those in front of him. It turned out, he was this near to Felix. Yet he didn't even know about it as Felix was in the direction his partner was responsible for. Felix also had no idea that Master Mania was in front of him due to the same reason. But honestly, even if he knew, he was completely disinterested in fighting it out with that phony. His ears were too precious for him to expose them to that cringy drama queen. If before, he planned to kill him to bump up his popularity, now it wasn't even worth the effort of listening to him reciting rehearsed catchphrases for his fans' enjoyment. Fighting with idols was always a pain in the ass, not to just Felix but to every player. But some sacrifices were required to obtain that fast popularity bump. After 10 seconds exactly, the entire maze's walls were all pieced up together, reshuffling everything: paths, puzzles, riddles, traps, positions, beasts' positions, and more. It was like they just dropped in it without any idea where to go and where to step. Felix massaged his neck after gaining mobility again. He turned around and saw that Charming was stretching her sexy exposed legs in front of him with a playful smile. Yet, Felix's indifferent expression didn't change a bit, as Asna's legs were by far the sexiest and prettiest legs he saw in his life. In comparison to Asna's ones, Charming's legs truly appeared like wooden sticks. She must step up her game if she wanted to tempt him. Remove your sticks from my face and tell me how many players you saw. Stoic, he ordered her while tapping on his bracelet, trying to create his own alarm on the shuffle's alarm. Dumbfounded, Charming Sky froze in her position, not knowing how to react to him resembling her most prized asset to sticks. Sticks, sticks, sticks. It kept repeating in her mind, and each time it sounded more humiliating than before. Abruptly, a finger snap near her face brought her back to reality. She looked at Felix standing before her with a bomb in his hand. Don't make me repeat myself. Tell me the number, and get out of my sight. His frigid voice made her realize that he was not joking around. Irked at his rough way of speaking to her, she threw her hair behind arrogantly and told him the number while walking away from him. I saw 6 players grouped up in front of a rare beast and 2 others with wounds on them. The moment she put a significant distance between them, she gave him the middle finger and bolted away, not planning to stay near to see his reaction. That girl is truly a piece of art. Asna sneered sarcastically. Whatever, let's go search for that serpent. Unbothered, Felix reactivated his infrared vision and pushed it to the limit to survey 100 meters around him. Although the maze shuffle hid the serpent's whereabouts, Felix was confident in finding it again faster than before. After all, no matter how large the displacement was, it would never go beyond 100 meters. As he assumed, the serpent was lying in the same position, coiled around itself 70 meters away from him. If his infrared vision didn't belong to a primogenitor, a supreme being, Felix would have found it difficult to spot the serpent as it had cold blood instead of hot one like the rest. The waves of energy the serpent kept releasing were more than enough to give itself away. He licked his lips in anticipation and sprinted towards his prey. It was time to make the terror serpent realize that Felix was the alpha serpent in this maze. A couple of 100 meters away from Felix. Guess who I just saw? Curious, Master Mania turned his head and glanced at his partner. Who? She moved around him with her hands folded behind her back. But she didn't say anything, she simply kept smiling mischievously, trying to get him more curious. Too bad, her attempt backfired as Master Mania turned his head away and continued walking forward with a disinterested expression. He already had his fans on his back to entertain, and he wasn't in the mood to entertain another one. So, his curiosity dies as fast as it appeared. Come on! Don't be like this! The girl chased after him and said with a smug smile, hee hee, I saw landlord. She lifted her chin, waiting to get praised over her effort, but the only thing she received was a frigid look she never expected would appear on Master Mania's handsome face. Chapter 137, Princess Bird vs the Glacial Bane Tree. Shaken, she gulped and narrated everything she saw without having him say anything. He was standing with a girl. Probably his partner. I didn't see her face as she was looking in another direction. Distance. He approached her with an ever-growing chilling aura. Meanwhile, his face was as aloof as ever, not showing a single hint of emotion. Even that frigid look was a slip that he quickly hid. Now, his face appeared the same as always. Yet she found that his entire demeanor was completely different. He resembled a suppressed volcano that was about to erupt at any moment. She backed away from him and leaned against the wall. She avoided eye contact and answered with an uncertain voice, I think between 200 meters to 300 meters. Slightly irked at this distance, he tightened his fists for a second, then released them with a long exhale from his nose. He understood that to reach Felix, the distance would widen from what she said to 600 meters or even a km. The twisted and complex paths were no joke, as they need through multiple ones to reach the position she saw him at before. However, would Felix stay in his place and wait for them? Not a fat chance. This meant the task of finding him would only get harder and more troublesome, since Felix could be at this point, anywhere in a 1 km radius in front of them. My dear fans, I think it's time to pay a visit to landlord. He moved away from his partner and put his hand on his shadow. He still owes me a handshake after all. He smiled and called out loud, emerge and hunt down my enemy. Shadowlings. 20 centimeters human-shaped shadows started to arise from Master Mania's shadow, creating ripples each time one of them appeared. The sight resembled baby turtles coming out of a shallow pond. Master Mania's fans cheered at this sight with flushed cheeks in excitement. They recognized this ability, as he used it before to locate the beasts around him. Although before, the number of shadowlings he created was few in comparison to this army that he kept creating non-stop. They knew if he released them all, Felix's position should be found effortlessly. Simply because those little things could sense shadows and travel through them unhindered. If Master Mania released only tens of them, the entire area around him would be under his surveillance. Don't even mention the hundreds that he just created. I think this should be enough. Master Mania lifted his hand from his shadow and eyed with a hint of elation at the little things bouncing and colliding with each other. Despite wasting 45% of his energy to create this staggering amount, it was all worth it in his eyes if he managed to locate Felix. He might not have said anything when Felix humiliated him, but his heart was never settled about the treatment he received in public. He was dying to pay him back in the most humiliating way possible. This opportunity couldn't be missed no matter what. Go! He ordered. The shadowlings collided and stomped on each other while they moved towards the shadows in the walls. Master Mania displayed a small smirk as he saw his babies submerge themselves in those shadows until not one of them remained near him. Let's follow them, Miss Sassy. He brushed his palms together and walked step by step towards the previous position Felix was at. Miss Sassy nodded her head and followed him with a blush, moved by his handsome visage and charisma of dealing with his injustice first before focusing on the wager. Meanwhile, the fan club of Felix and Master Mania all held their breaths in eagerness and anticipation for their idols to clash. The only downside about the epic fight that was about to happen was that Zoe had the camera focused on Princess Bird. But they couldn't boo her about it as the princess was about to fight an epic beast solo. A fight worth watching more so than Felix's battle against the serpent and the upcoming idol clash. Simply because she was a legendary bloodliner as well. And every player with a legendary bloodline was a primary focal point for the camera. The only reason Zoe wasn't paying attention to Princess Bird before was due to her slaying rare beasts with one ability. Nothing more, nothing less. The fights were boring and quite lackluster. But now, the spectators would fray her alive if she switched the camera to anyone. Not even for Felix. They already saw his bloodline and understood everything about it. The only things that were still piquing their interest were his last ability and new inducements. However, they would rather watch the infamous Princess Bird in action than to watch him terrorize the blind serpent. They did not doubt that Felix would bully the serpent even though they saw how strong it was. After all, the Iron Titan was by far the strongest epic beast in the maze, yet he still demolished it solo. Their memory was still fresh on how it went. 10 meters left and Princess will come face to face with the glacial Bane tree. Zoe brought the camera closer to the beast to highlight its strange features for all to see. The beast had a body completely made of crystal see-through ice. But the strange thing about it was the fact that its shape was based on a maple tree. Roots, branches, stems, and even leaves were made of ice. If anyone saw it without knowing that it was a beast, they were going to definitely assume it as a tree sculpture. What you are seeing right now is the famously known dual elemental beast. Zoe said. Whoa! It can use ice and plant elements. That's so nutty. I understand the ice element, but how is it going to use plant element as well with those features? The spectators couldn't help but let out gasps of exclamation and wonder at Zoe's declaration. It was clear to them that the beast was an ice elementalist. However, they just couldn't figure out how the plant element was going to be used by it. After all, there was not a hint of greenish color on its body. Everything was ice-based, even its interior. Interior. They gaped with bulging eyes at the interior of the beast that was in full display, trying to see if he had any organs. Nonetheless, they couldn't see a single one, not even its heart. I wanted to explain why the glacial tree had no organs, but Princess Bird is about to make a move. Zoe brought the camera to Princess and said, everything will be clear after this fight. You just need to pay attention, and don't forget to cheer. The spectators stopped bothering about the tree, and laid their eyes on Princess Bird, waiting and hoping to be amazed. Princess Bird didn't disappoint their expectation, as, by the time she made eye contact with the tree, she called softly, "Wings of the apex eagle, grace me with your presence." Sapphire apex wings. Her exposed back suddenly began to morph and warp, as flesh was torn and blood streamed down. Whoosh! Sapphire feather-like wings protruded from her back, extending for at least 1 meter on each side. If it wasn't for the blood staining its breathtaking outlook, the sight would appear more pleasing to the spectators. Blood? The spectators quickly focused on her facial expression, trying to see if she was in pain from the process of morphing. Yet, her lips and nose, which were in the open, didn't even quiver. She simply flapped her wings once and all the blood on it was hurled in every direction. However, this was not what amazed the viewers, but actually how the feathers of the wings got hardened like sapphire gems before she flapped her wings. No wonder they were named as such. It turned out that her wings might appear feather-like, but they were actually made out of sapphire gems. And what's even more shocking was her free control over its transformation from feather to gems, and vice versa. Before, they didn't see her use any of this, as she simply threw sharp feathers from her hands, like throwing daggers at the rare beasts, killing them in an instant. Even when she met with a player, they simply bowed their heads and left her alone, not daring to attack and offend her. Heck, she even met with a 4-players alliance before, and still, they let her go peacefully without raising a fart in her presence. Her background was too large for commoners like them to mess around with. It was better to treat her as air in this game and play with each other. Their understandable cowardly behavior made it harder for Princess to show anything else besides feather spray. Thankfully, she finally met with a beast on her league, forcing her to pop out one of her hidden cards at the start. How is this fair? The spectators shouted at the sight of Princess Bird, soaring 80 meters above the tree. If it wasn't for the blue barrier blocking the sky, she could have gone further up. Regardless, just 80 meters was enough to brutalize the stationary tree without any way of retaliation. Princess could literally just keep hovering like this, and spray her feathers at the tree until it dies. Damn it! If the fight is going to be like this, I should have focused on Landlord. Regrets began to wash over Zoe, as she saw Princess Bird began to flap her wings in direction of the tree, sending a shower of hardened sapphire feathers, at each flap. Phew! Phew! Just as she assumed, the tree did nothing but defend by creating an ice wall in front of it. Yet, the wall cracked after 2 volleys, and the third did the finishing blow, leaving the tree exposed to Princess. Sigh, whatever, it's better if she wrapped this out fast so we can catch Landlord and Master Mania battle at LE. Just as she tried to switch her vision to Felix, so she could check up on his ongoing battle with the Terror Serpent, her mouth parted at the horrifying sight of the tree's icy leaves all pointing at Princess Bird akin to sharp daggers going for the kill. The tree revolved its body twice, from the base of its stem until it couldn't add any more pressure. The tightness of its action caused cracks to appear on its crystal-like body. Yet, the tree didn't seem to mind, as its focus was clearly on the princess. The pointy leaves were the perfect proof. Whoosh! Then out of nowhere, it relaxed its body, causing the branches to spin once, releasing hundreds to thousands of leaves in every direction, left, right, ground, and especially the air. The leaves blackened the entire area with their numerous numbers. Phew! 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 Princess Bird didn't even attempt to dodge, as it was simply an impossible endeavor. Thus, she hardened her feathers and hugged herself, not exposing a single inch of her petite body. Her defensive maneuver helped her resist the barrage of the leaves easily, as they didn't manage to leave even a scratch on the wings. However, she was still affected negatively by them in another form. The spectators watched her body nosedive towards the ground under the rain of leaves. After all, it was only common sense for her to drop immediately after she stopped flapping her wings. Smash! Her wings took most of the fall damage, leaving her unscathed. But, nothing saved her from feeling dizzy after this hard collision. Ouch! My head is about to split. Pained from the sudden headache, she hugged her head with her eyes closed shut. She wasn't worried about the tree making a move on her, as she was confident in her wings' defenses. Too bad, the hundreds of sharp branches extending towards her, said otherwise. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _482829862647204110 for visiting. Chapter 138, Princess Bird Slaying the Glacial Bane Tree. 2-in-1. Princess Bird kept massaging her temples, unbeknownst to the great danger fast approaching her. Zoe and the spectators kept shouting for her to be careful, knowingly, their voices weren't going to make a difference. I will make you pay for messing up my bangs. Displeased, Princess Bird touched her long bangs that were now completely in disarray. A vast difference from their previous silkiness. One could only wonder if it was her confidence in her defenses that let her have this laid-back attitude or simply her arrogance and stupidity. Regardless of both reasons, the branches already reached her and entangled the wings by rolling around it continuously until it was under a secure grip. Before Princess Bird could even comprehend what happened, the glacial tree recalled its branches rapidly, bringing her with them akin to a spider pulling a cocooned prey to its grasps. Ah! Princess Bird could only let out a delayed yelp after the deed was already done. Zoe and the spectators were honestly quite embarrassed for her father. After all, for him to get her a legendary bloodline and all the resources needed for her integration. Yet, the result was this trashy performance. They didn't know whether she lacked experience in death and life battles or she simply was that careless to underestimate an epic dual elementalist beast. If she thought that her father would save her from its clutches if things went horribly wrong, then she was truly in for a treat. The SG rules were absolute. No one could interfere from the outside and save her if she was about to die, even if her background was terrifying. In front of the Queen and the entity of the SGA, every background could only bow their heads in submissiveness if they wanted to continue their legacy. Princess Bird is truly in a pinch. Zoe wasn't exaggerating even a bit, as the glacial tree kept creating new icy branches and used them to tighten its grip even further. Although the wings weren't broken or scratched by the continuous assault of the leaves, Princess Bird wasn't having the best of her time by getting strangled like this. What do I do? What do I do? Her brain was working on its full capacity to get her out of this miserable situation. However, nothing concrete was found yet, as every other ability she possessed was not equipped to handle this kind of attack. A while passed by, and the scene was still the same, Princess Bird getting absolutely owned by the glacial tree without any way to retaliate. If it wasn't for the wing's overpowered defenses, she would have turned into a corpse by now. Nonetheless, that wasn't far off, as Princess Bird began to have difficulty breathing. The tightness of the branches, plus her hardened wings, didn't allow a single oxygen molecule to bypass their heavy lockdown. The spectators couldn't help but worry about her well-being at this point. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that a legendary bloodliner could be dominated like this. As far as they saw in the majority of the games, a legendary bloodliner either dominate his opponent or retreat to safety when shit gets worse. Just like Felix's battle against the Titan. It was clean and neat. Thus, their confusion and worry were understandable. They honestly didn't know anymore whether to believe that her Sapphire Apex Eagle bloodline was terrible or her Lackle.U.S.Tur battle experience was the cause of this situation. Whatever it was, Princess Bird must think of a solution swiftly if she doesn't want to die in such a humiliating way. Damn it! Papa and sisters must be watching the stream now. I can't let them see such a disgraceful battle. Otherwise, I won't escape getting extra practice drills added. Princess Bird felt a shiver on her back as she recalled those drills. She shook her head firmly. I would rather feel the pain of morphing twice than practice those drills. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Retract wings." Suddenly, under the eyes of everyone, the wings which were being entrapped by the branches disappeared into light particles, leaving the branches in a fixed position. If they were made of rubber, they might have instantly snapped on Princess Bird after the wings' disappearance. Alas, ice couldn't stretch or retract. Thus, Princess Bird immediately fell downwards, escaping the damned tree clutches. However, the glacial tree proved that it was worthy of being an epic beast, as it reflexively sent the rest of its free branches at her prey that was nosediving. Sapphire Apex Wings! Princess Bird called out loud without even turning her head to check on the fast-approaching branches. This time she winced in pain, as the wings came out of the same wounded spot on her back. Blood and flesh were hurled everywhere yet again. No wonder she didn't want to use this strategy until she was at end of the rope. Who would want to torture himself twice by this messed up ability? However, desperate times called for desperate measures. Princess Bird should feel blessed that her ability allowed her to remove the morphing. If those wings were based on mutation, then her fate could be far worse than wincing. The glacial tree didn't stop its attempts of trying to recapture Princess Bird, as it kept sending branch after branch. However, Princess Bird wasn't a fool to put herself in the same position. Her wings kept flapping rapidly, like a graceful butterfly moving from one place to another unpredictably. Not a single branch managed to touch her clothes in the process. The spectators had to admit that her dodging techniques and style were by far one of the best they saw. A total opposite of Landlord's monkey-like dodging techniques he showed before. She is finally out of the tree attacking zone. Zoe was the first to celebrate with her arms raised in the air at the sight of Princess Bird whizzing away from the range of the branches. The spectators followed after and cheered as well. Is she going to turn back and take her revenge or retreat? Zoe's eyes lightened up and said, "She is turning back. No one dares humiliate the royal family of the Maganda tribe and live to tell the tale." Princess Bird hovered at the same height as before, but this time she kept a quite large distance between the tree and herself. "Let's see how you deal with this." She raised her hands in the air and called softly, "Furious Tornado!" Whoosh! Whoosh! Her wings' flapping speed increased, and with each flap, a gale of wind could be seen heading towards the glacial tree. The gales kept adding up on each other and whirling around the tree, creating a furious tornado enclosing it in the center. Even so, Princess Bird didn't stop adding gales at the already behemoth tornado. She wanted to make sure that every branch, root, and leaf snaps into pieces. So, she could have an easy time dealing with the stem. Cracks. The noise of ice cracking and shattering kept resounding in the ears of the spectators. Yet, they didn't cheer at all, as the sight that greeted them was more shocking than Princess summoning a towering tornado. The glacier tree was rejuvenating every broken part of its body at the speed of light. The glacial tree's broken body parts kept healing at plain sight. Shattered leaves were renewed, broken branches recovered into becoming a whole, and the cracks on the stem withdrew rapidly, leaving a smooth-looking surface. The spectators drew a deep breath at such a busted rejuvenation speed. They knew this battle was going to be a long one unless Princess Bird found out the weakness of the glacial tree. Although the tree seemed like it was part of the immortal-type beasts, the spectators couldn't help but doubt its truthfulness. After all, those kinds of beasts were famously known for having a moving core inside their bodies that held their souls. However, in the case of the glacial tree, the interior was fully exposed to them, and so far, not a single hint of a core was seen inside. Thus, the beast definitely belonged to another type. They just didn't know which one. Thankfully, they had Zoe, whose eyes never stopped scanning the battle, the stream, and the audience's facial expressions all at once. She had to, otherwise, she might miss the best opportunity to sound her explanation without appearing out of the picture. This is the reason why the beast had no organs. She paused for a bit to heighten their curiosity and said, smiling, because it belongs to the parasite-type beasts. The spectators immediately recoiled from their seats at her mentioning that damned type of beasts. Some of them were even about to spew fire from their eyes. Who could blame them though? The parasite-type beasts were infamous for causing the biggest and most impactful damages during the historical humans' war against beasts. It was common knowledge in the human race, like 1 + 1 = 2. Billions of lives lost single-handedly due to those parasites that could enter the brain of humans and consume their memories, obtaining full control over their personality, bloodline abilities, and even their element. Fully disguising as the real thing without a single flaw. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number 2-in-1 _48377544281488473 for visiting. One could only imagine the fate of the human army when one of those parasites took control over a high-ranking personnel. This was the reason they were hated to the core by everyone. Because just one of those parasites had caused a mass genocide of 100 million at once. Such a dreadful history should not be visited again. Irked and livid, the audience began booing out loud with bloodshot eyes at surprisingly the glacial tree. Although they knew that it was simply a digital version of the real thing, their suppressed rage was uncaring about it. They just wanted to vent, and vent they did. The stadium rumbled and shook under their harmonious booing. Meanwhile, the spectators in the chat kept spamming only one word. Kill. Pleased, Zoe sat in her chair with one leg above the other with a slight smirk. She had predicted this outcome, but she was glad about it happening. In her eyes, as long as those were not boos directed at her, she would gladly listen to them all day long. After all, the MCS were getting paid commissions based on how hype and active the spectators were. She would be a fool to miss such a juicy commission. However, Princess Bird's fight was still a priority, thus she stood up and lifted the mic close to her lips. I understand your rage and fury. But instead of booing for a digital being, she suggested with a smile, why not cheer for Princess Bird? Who knows, your cheers might actually be the fuse that allows her to win the fight. The spectators, just like puppeteers, did exactly as she said without second thoughts. The boos were replaced by cheers and chants, rocking the stadium even further than before. Hee, another bonus. I might actually get paid double than my previous game. Zoe's smile widened until it became a satisfied grin. She then stopped bothering about them and refocused on the ongoing fight. It seems like our princess still didn't realize that she is battling a parasite-type beast. Zoe shook her head at the sight of Princess Bird continuous spamming of furious tornadoes and feather sprays. She understood that as long as the parasite wasn't killed, the tree would keep healing itself back up without effort. The parasite's ability to steal its host element and abilities was not a joke. It was clear that the tree was a plant elemental-based beast, and the parasite was an ice elemental beast, thus after it consumed everything about the tree, it became a dual elementalist with that kind of shape. Princess Bird soon began huffing with drops of sweat dripping down her chin. Her reckless use of energy began to take a toll on her body. It appeared like she consumed more than 70% all at once for her to sweat and huff like that. What's the deal with this thing? Why can't it just die already? She stopped throwing abilities randomly, and simply hovered in the air, eyeing the tree waving its branches in the air, like it was mocking her pitiful attempts. It does not have a core, either vital areas to target. So what the hell is it? She scratched her hair in irritation. I should have paid more attention to the bestial terminology in class. There was one way to find out, I guess. I hope 2 seconds is enough. She pursed her lips and removed her bangs to the side, exposing sapphire-like hexagon eyes. They were shaped exactly like gems, breathtaking, and unique. The spectators were shocked at her eyes, and more so at the reason for her hiding them. Who was in his right mind to not display such beautiful eyes to fish for appreciation? However, those thoughts dashed as soon as they appeared after seeing tiny drops of blood began to stream from them. Found you, little thing! Princess Bird returned the bangs in their position immediately after getting what wanted. Her wide smile plus the blood streaking down her cheek drew a creepy sight. But, she was unbothered by it, as every time she used her passive predator sight her eyes bled due to not being able to handle all the tiny minuscule details it kept providing the brain. Her passive was exactly like Eagle's long-distance eyesight, but more advanced, as it showed everything like it was mega-zoomed. Not a single strand of hair could miss her sight even if it was hundreds of meters away. Don't even mention the parasite that was hiding at the bottom center of the tree. As for the bangs, they honestly had no meaning besides stopping others from seeing her eyes. She was sick and tired of everyone's flattery every time they laid their eyes on them. It's time to end this. She spread her wings wide, displaying their enchanting beauty, and pointed her finger at the tree. Dazzle! A sudden beam of bluish light was projected at the tree, hiding its existence from everyone. The spectators stared in disbelief at that beam of light. They couldn't comprehend how was she able to use such ability when her element was clearly wind-based. After all, she kept spamming tornadoes. However, before they could even break out of their shock, they heard Princess Bird proclaim out loud, "Sapphire Tornado Technique." The beam of light was replaced with gales of wind, followed by sapphire sharp feathers. Their combination created a towering blue tornado that had hundreds of feathers revolving around its center, and especially the tree. Slice slice! The tree's most prized rejuvenation ability wasn't actually used. Its body parts kept being slashed and sliced into halves by the speeding feathers akin to knife-slicing batter. Yet, the parasite was as unresponsive as ever. The spectators couldn't understand what the hell was going on. But they just watched with excited expressions and cheered on Princess Bird to destroy the beast once and for all. The blue tornado answered their wishes, as it ripped the glacial tree from its roots, bringing it along in its whirling journey. The parasite that was hiding at the very bottom of the tree within thousands of icy roots, was exposed in the open to the horrifying array of feathers. It kept squirming like a worm trying to activate its rejuvenation ability. But to no avail. Slash! Its fate was decided the moment it was exposed, as it got sliced into half by one passing feather. Its defenses were truly garbage. But it was understandable, as the universe didn't give this type of beast such hateful characteristic without such a massive weakness. Shatter! The tree broke into small pieces, then into light particles after the controller was dead. Princess Bird stopped the tornado from raging, as it kept consuming her energy every second it was active. Without further ado, she dove down and removed the damned wings as well and sat down on the ground, taking large breaths each time. She really spent everything she had to win the fight. Not to mention she used all of her abilities plus even her technique. Chapter 139, Another Fireworks. My papa is definitely going to punish me. Saddened, she sulked while wiping the bloodstains from her cheeks. She knew that her performance was beyond trash, and there was nothing much she could say to explain herself. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _484023361581122176 for visiting. However, the spectators didn't share the same view, as they were astounded by her fascinating abilities and techniques. To this point, they still had no idea what was her true element. They assumed it was wind-based because she used tornadoes, but that beam of light raised some doubts. Zoe didn't keep them wondering for long, as she took a deep breath and explained what exactly happened during that battle. Before you understand her abilities, you must first know her elements. She swiped her finger at a small screen and displayed all of Princess Bird's known information in plain sight. There was no reason to hold back anymore. She then pointed at the two logos of elements. One had the shape of a wind gale, and the other had a hexagon shape. She is a dual elementalist. A user of wind and gems. The spectators either had shocked expressions or knowing smiles at her revelation. After all, not everyone was unfamiliar with Princess Bird, as some minority already were fans of her and followed her through those few games she played. Yet, they didn't have a club like Felix or Mastermania. They were too few to have one. Thus, they had no plans to further increase their fandom by exposing Princess Bird's abilities to all. The sapphire apex eagle is one of the few dual elementalist beasts that use wind for offense and mobility, while gems for defense and beauty. She highlighted all of the abilities she used and explained only dazzle. As for the other two, sapphire apex wings and feather spray, they were self-explanatory. Dazzle is the ultimate ability of her legendary bloodline. It blocks anyone who was exposed to the beam of light from not using their abilities temporarily, whether passives or actives. She raised her voice higher after seeing their looks of understanding. That's right. The reason the parasite couldn't use her rejuvenation was due to it. A truly befitting ability of the gems element. After all, gems like diamonds, ruby, and sapphires were known for two things, dazzling beauty, and hardness. This further explained why her wings had such overpowered defenses. The spectators figured as much from her clarification, and actually even more so, as they managed to understand that Furious Tornado was actually her permanent ability that she edged in her 1% after breaking through the first stage of replacement. Plus it must be an ability from a legendary bloodline as well. It was pretty clear after she combined Furious Tornado and Feather Spray, creating Sapphire Feathers Tornado technique. It was common knowledge that the only way to create techniques was to combine two different abilities from different bloodlines. It didn't matter if it was a passive from Tier 1 bloodline, combined with Tier 7 active bloodline. Princess Bird obviously got this technique from her father instead of creating it by herself. The process of creating techniques was far more deadly than one could understand. If it wasn't so, bloodliners wouldn't bother competing to join strong clans. But that was another matter entirely. After a couple of minutes of sitting, Princess Bird finally stood up with hands on her knees as support. She was truly too tired to make any large movement. However, the epic chest was still in front of her, gleaming with a purplish light. Princess or not, nothing beats the feeling of obtaining a reward by one's own effort. Thus, she was pretty excited to open the chest. Not to mention the fact that she was probably going to be the first ranker after obtaining the points inside, surpassing Felix. She smiled cutely and walked towards it under the cheers of the audience. This was it, the moment they were waiting for. An actual normal opening for an epic chest. The way Felix kept opening them traumatized them greatly. At this point, they just wanted for Princess Bird to open it normally without any dramatic additions. Am I going to be rewarded with 1500 GP or more? Princess Bird extended her hand with anticipation clearly written on her face. Boom! However, a sudden explosion in the sky made her pause her action and glance at it. It wasn't only her who had their attention stolen by the explosion. But every player was affected by it and lifted their heads as well. Landlord has obtained 1400 GP from an epic chest, phew. Boom. Bird's Call has obtained 1450 GP from epic chest. Just as the players regained their wits and wanted to continue their journey, a second explosion in the air stopped their footsteps. They gulped and raised their heads with stiff expressions, scared that Felix did it again. But after seeing the owner of the third fireworks, their tense shoulders eased up a bit. They knew that Princess Bird had a legendary bloodline just like Landlord, thus if there was anyone in the maze who was capable of repeating his feat, it got to be her. As Princess Bird expected, their reaction was quite lackluster, as they soon ignored the bright lights and continued moving forward, hoping to luck out on the exit. At that point, none of this bullshit points competition would matter anymore, as the championship was always the best reward in every game. That concluded Princess Bird's camera time. Zoe smiled and suggested, how about we watch Landlord's replay on his fight with the serpent? Felix's fans screamed their lung out in approval, while the rest murmured and mumbled like a bunch of tsundere. Indifferent to their opinions, Zoe tapped on Felix's small screen and dragged her finger left. A few seconds later, she paused the replay and sent it to a large screen with her finger. The audience chatter immediately shushed down after landing their eyes on Felix sprinting with a clear destination on his mind. They couldn't help but be amazed again at his all-knowing eyesight. They clearly noticed that the serpent was 70 meters away from him in a straight line, but with the complex path added, the distance should be doubled or even tripled. Yet, he still managed to easily figure out the correct path. They wondered that if the bet wasn't holding him back, would the game end in 30 minutes if he used this busted ability to spot the exit? Soon, they removed those meaningless thoughts and focused on the upcoming battle. Felix and the serpent had only a wall separating them. Chapter 140, Replaying Landlord's Battle vs the Terror Serpent. However, they waited and waited, yet Felix still didn't move from his position. He was probably planning on how to slay the serpent. Zoe drummed her fingers on the commentary desk and added, "Let's skip it." Good thing she did, as Felix moved from his position exactly 4 minutes later, holding sky blue bombs in his hands. Delighted and excited, the spectators began their guessing game on what kind of inducement was the blue one. The majority believed that it was a dehydration inducement due to its color. But, the rest argued that it didn't make sense, as the serpent was a desert-based beast. Thus its body was equipped with dehydration countermeasures. If not, surviving in the desert was wishful thinking. Soon, they stopped bothering with guessing and just focused on Felix, who was approaching the serpent on his tiptoes, trying his best to make his presence hidden. A smart move, but would it actually work? Zoe smirked and explained, "The terror serpent ears can spot the tiniest vibration in the air. This meant the moment he entered its range he would be noticed." She chuckled, unless he stopped breathing, he could forget about ambushing the terror serpent. Her words proved to be right, as, by the time Felix's foot landed on the territory of the serpent, it turned its head instantly and gazed at his direction with its creepy whitish eyes. He truly got spotted red-handed akin to a thief. But, Felix just shrugged his shoulders and threw one blue bomb first. Phew! It whizzed in the air, like an unstoppable bullet. However, that was just in the eyes of the audience. As for the serpent, it simply waved its long tail from left to right, creating a screen of sand in the process. The bomb landed on it and never made a sound again. Felix snapped his finger, trying to manually explode it, but still, no reaction was shown inside the sand screen. Indifferent to his attack getting blocked easily, Felix kept creating bombs and throwing them periodically. He didn't care about wasting energy, as he had to make sure that the serpent stayed in a defensive position, so it wouldn't create a desert and burrow underneath his feet. At that point, the fight's difficulty would truly increase by tenfolds. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number S Battle vs the Terror Serpent, _484235302278884050 for visiting. Therefore, he had to be on offense all the time while making sure to try his best and enter the 8-meter diameter as quickly as possible. His poisonous aura and super strength were the keys to winning the battle. It seemed that Landlord was pulling all stops to approach the serpent. Zoe zoomed the camera on the serpent's scales that were opening up one by one and smiled wickedly, but life isn't that easy. Felix's bombs did create some trouble for the serpent, as it had to constantly create sand screens to protect itself from them. Its senses kept sending warnings to avoid the bombs at all costs. Nevertheless, it still could open its scales one by one and create a desert again. It might not be as fast as before, but at least the environment would be on its side. Beasts that relied on elements as their source of power were at their strongest inside the same elemental environment. Felix knew so as well. Thus he had to end this battle before the desert fills up the open intersection again. Landlord was truly struggling to get closer. He knew that his inducement aura was the only way to inflict damages to the serpent. The spectators thought so as well. They were not blind to not see that Felix's bombs were absolutely useless against the serpent-tight defenses. No matter how fast he threw his bombs or how random and unpredictable his throw was, the serpent easily spotted and blocked them with sand screens. The loud air vibration those bombs were making as they coursed through the air was deafening in the serpent's ears. What made the situation even worse for Felix was the continuously increasing sand under his feet akin to a ticking time bomb. He knew that time wasn't on his side, as the more he delayed the battle the further his chances got reduced to land a deadly blow on the serpent. However, the serpent's never-ending slithering wasn't making it any easier for him. As the harder Felix tried to approach the serpent, the faster the serpent slithered away. Just because it was a beast, it didn't mean it was a fool to not understand that the bug in front of it was trying his best to close the distance between them. Therefore, it did the complete opposite and made sure that his presence was kept at least 20 meters away from it. The spectators couldn't help but appreciate the serpent's intelligence. It might not be the same as higher-tiered beasts that had intelligence comparable to humans or even surpassing it. But still, it was enough to put Felix at his wits' end, not knowing how to continue this battle forward. It was as clear as daylight that his fighting style was completely countered by it. The only reason this battle was still in this statement was due to his never-ending chase and smart way of utilizing the limited number of bombs. If he stopped his offense for even a bit or dropped his guard, the serpent wouldn't hesitate to launch a deadly counterattack. Not to mention pulling all stops and opening up every scale on its golden body to fasten the desert creation. Hence, his only option was to either retreat from this battle and fight another time or rely on a miracle. The spectators believed that Felix was definitely not going to escape since he clearly opened up the epic chest that was guarded by the serpent. This meant he killed it using his ultimate ability. That was the only plausible reason in this scenario. Excited, their eyes shone with anticipation, waiting for him to unveil the strongest ability of his unique bloodline. It was finally time for their patience to be rewarded. Guesses and small bets as always were hurled around the stadium, trying to figure out the ability nature. Was it a morphing type like Princess Bird? Or elemental type? Heck, it could even be a mental type. It all depended on the abilities pool of the beast. The possibilities were limitless. Unfortunately, they waited, and still, nothing broke those two's stalemate. The only thing that was continuously changing was the desert on the floor that was about to reach Felix's kneecaps. Why was he still not using his hidden card? Zoe pressed a finger on the upper lip, confused by his stinginess to save up his strongest ability even on this unfavorable condition. Doubts were slowly sneaking up her mind that Felix wasn't actually an origin purity bloodliner, but was still on the greater purity. Her doubts were thoroughly understandable, as there was simply no other reason besides so. After all, Felix literally spent the last 6 minutes doing nothing but wasting his energy by useless bomb throws. If he had any hidden card, he should have used it by now and not hide it like this. Since he was doing nothing but harm his chances of obtaining more GP from other beasts for absolutely no reason. The energy was a precious resource in every game that shouldn't be wasted wantonly. Just like in Princess Bird's moronic fight. She wasted at least an extra 40% energy, simply due to her lacking battle experience. If she used her brain for even a second, she wouldn't have showered the glacial tree with feathers and tornadoes recklessly, without understanding the reason for its rejuvenation. But Zoe knew that Landlord wasn't dumb like Princess Bird to not see this issue as well. After all, he won his first game and was crushing this one as well. Something only a few hardcore players were able to do. This made her even more confused. Is he really still on greater purity? She shook her head and reasoned, that can't be right. After all, he did kill the serpent. There must be something that we are missing. The spectators shared the same view as her. They didn't want to believe that Felix was actually still on greater purity, yet outperforming peak stage 1 bloodliners. The implication was too shocking, as it meant that he was not just a prodigy but a monster. Although, his unique legendary bloodline took some of his credit, that didn't change the fact that he was outshining everyone on the game. Wasn't Princess Bird the perfect proof? She had a legendary bloodline as well. Plus she was a peak first stage bloodliner with a technique. Nonetheless, she had to spend every drop of her energy just to take down an epic beast that was weaker by an inch in comparison to the Iron Titan. Zoe fought the urge to fast forward this meaningless wild goose chase and jump straight to the climax of the battle, where Felix slew the serpent. Curiosity on how he did it was constantly eating her up. But she resisted it and continued watching the fight with the spectators, commentating on every outstanding play by him or the serpent. The fight might be stale, but it wasn't lacking in aesthetics. As colorful bombs were hurled everywhere, sometimes exploding before they reached the serpent, rising colorful clouds of mist. Suddenly, the serpent that was slithering in circles around the open space, stopped and turned its head in direction of a shadow on a wall. It sensed a shallow air vibration coming from that place. However, its worst mistake was focusing on something else in front of Felix. Poof! A blue bomb exploded immediately on its head, marking a clear strike. The spectators stared at this sight with eyes wide open, not knowing what the F***ck had just happened. How could the stalemate be broken like this? The terror serpent wasn't supposed to make such a rookie mistake. Their minds couldn't fathom the reason it paused its movement and stared at the wall like a retard. However, the moment Felix spoke out loud, everything clicked on their minds. A chill couldn't help but course through their backs at the thought of Felix's cunning scheme and bold foresight. Took you long enough to make a move, Mr. Mania. Felix turned his head and gazed with a shimmering red light in his eyes at the same spot the serpent was focusing on before. My patience was truly running dry. He smirked and said, however, I have to thank you for creating this opening. I was waiting eagerly just for it. Immediately after, he leaned forward and sprinted towards the serpent that was coiled around itself inside a sphere of sand that kept flickering from time to time, like it wasn't made properly. One could only wonder what kind of inducement Felix used to force the serpent into this defensive position. Chapter 141, Baiting the Serpent Out of its Turtle Shell. 2-in-1. However, Zoe paused the replay, freezing Felix on a sprinting position, and zoomed at the shadow on the wall, trying to find Master Mania. If this wasn't a replay, she and the spectators could have easily noticed him by using their omnipotent vision before Felix or the serpent found him. But, that was only possible when spectating the games live. Nevertheless, there was still a bonus from watching replays, and that was the ability to pause whenever the MC liked and take his sweet time commentating on the battle. Found him. Zoe tapped a spot on the leftmost of the wall, highlighting a human-shaped shadow with a white line. Startled, the spectators gasped at the close distance that was between Mastermania and Felix. There were only 10 meters separating them. A distance close enough to land a deadly ambush on Felix. Who would have thought that Mr. Mania already found landlord and was sneaking up on him like this? Zoe exclaimed out loud with a hint of astonishment. She truly forgot about Mastermania and his partner who were chasing after Felix before. Who could blame her though? Mastermania's fans were as silent as a corpse in the chat and the stadium, like they had no plans of speaking about what they saw live. Meanwhile, Landlord's fans were trying their best to not spoil the events that transpired when she and the rest were spectating Princess Bird live. The club leader Emma threatened to kick anyone who went and did so. Those two clubs' muteness caused this current situation of Zoe and the spectators, having no idea that Mastermania, Felix, and the Serpent were about to entangle in a three-way fight. Too bad, he must have appeared as clear as crystal in Landlord's X-ray vision. She chuckled and added, he was probably approaching him slowly in the shadows, planning to strike the moment Landlord dropped his guard. She shook her head, pity, he was simply moving based on Landlord's wishes. Downcast, Mastermania's fans lowered their heads at her words. They knew that her analysis was far worse than what she thought, as they saw with their own eyes how Mastermania was found by Felix before he even fought the Serpent. Their omnipotent vision allowed them to track their idol movement constantly, even when he was submerged in the shadows by using his active ability Shadow's Cloak. Thus, they realized easily that when Felix was frozen in front of the wall for a couple of minutes, it wasn't because he was planning how to slay the Serpent as everyone assumed. No sir. The F***er was staring straight at Mastermania, who was 2 walls away from him. They didn't know if his X-ray vision gave him a clear image of Mastermania or just some fuzzy dots. The only thing they knew was that Felix waited a full 6 minutes until Mastermania closed the distance between them, before making his move on the Terror Serpent. Even a fool would realize that Felix planned beforehand for Mastermania to help him create that slight opening. That thought scared the shit out of them, as they couldn't believe that Felix recognized that his abilities were going to struggle against the Serpent, but still went for it, trusting in his guts that Mastermania was going to try and ambush him during his battle. There was no other alternative reason than this. After all, the moment Mastermania stepped inside the territory of the Serpent, Felix threw the bomb before the Serpent even turned its head. He predicted that it would pause after hearing the air vibration of Mastermania's breaths, and took advantage of that slight chance to finally poison the Serpent successfully. Thus, I believe that Landlord didn't want to use his ultimate ability, due to the constant pressure of knowing that he might be ambushed any moment. Zoe raised her nose up slightly, and continued her moronic analysis with a smirk. I bet that his ability takes time to activate, leaving him exposed to Mastermania's aggression. The audience nodded their heads in agreement, as this was far more reasonable than Felix not being at origin purity. Let's carry on watching. Zoe sat back on her commentary chair and unpaused the replay. Her eyes brightened up immediately after seeing Felix surround himself in a sky-bluish mist while rushing towards the Serpent, which kept moving its head randomly like it was hit by a hammer. A guess already formed on her mind about Felix's new inducement after seeing that sight and the flickering sand barrier between tangible and intangible. Dizziness inducement. It was one of the few plausible causes, since it was a known fact that beasts or bloodliners weren't able to activate their abilities to their full potential if their focus was constantly being broken. However, her guess was completely off the mark, as she heard Felix say out loud, I dare you to use your ears after absorbing my senses disorientation inducement. It turned out, Felix actually straightway used senses disorientation as his first choice instead of paralyzing, sleepiness, and even dizziness. As the owner of the bloodline, he was constantly practicing and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of his inducements. So far, he found that paralyze bombs were ineffective against large-sized beasts. As for their bodies to be paralyzed, a heavy dose was a must, and the only way to do so was by either relying on his aura or merging inducements. Using his aura in that situation was impossible due to the distance separating them, while merging inducements took a significant toll on his energy. As for sleepiness, He found that it could be resisted, or even broken through if the enemy's mentality was heightened to the peak. The reason why so, was that the inducement simply eluded the absorber that he was extremely tired and desperately needed sleep. In this sense, the feeling could be resisted, making the inducement fail to take effect. Felix wasn't stupid to risk using this unreliable inducement on the terror serpent. Last but not least, his so-called dizziness inducement that Zoe guessed. Although Felix could have used it, he knew that its effect wasn't good vs the serpent itself. Since it was blind. It was a known fact that dizziness created a false sense that you or your surroundings were spinning or moving constantly and randomly. This feeling was called vertigo. It worked like a charm against disgraced Face and Battalion, but against the serpent that was blind in the first place, this effect was absolutely useless on it. It was just common sense. In the end, senses disorientation inducement was the best possible choice against the terror serpent. The astonishing scene in front of Zoe and the spectators further emphasized this point. As, the moment Felix brought the serpent inside the blue mist, the fight turned into a one-man show. The serpent's biggest reason why it was able to resist Felix's abilities in the first place was its extreme hearing sense. However, after absorbing his inducement, it wasn't able to tell where his punches and kicks were coming from, due to its ears failing to pinpoint the exact position of his attacks. Sometimes the air vibration painted out a clear vision that his attack was coming from the left, just to end up being smacked from the right. The worst part about this was that even its smell sense was failing it tragically, leaving it confused about where Felix's smell was coming from. The terror serpent was now blind, confused, and misled. Plus, with Felix's constant bashing, its mentality couldn't get any worse, making it unable to use its sand element to its full potential. If it wasn't for the desert that it created before, helping it surround its body with barriers of sand reflexively, Felix would have already ripped its head off with his hands. This inducement was truly the terror serpent's worst ban. Despite so, the serpent didn't give up on the fight yet, as it kept whipping its tail aimlessly, hoping to land a lucky strike on Felix. However, he was too elusive to be caught. He knew when to approach and when to retreat. Plus, he continued to confuse the already muddled serpent by mouthing noises and taunts. The serpent knew that its condition was dire. The bug was constantly smashing its sand barriers like they were made of glass, and before long the desert that was facilitating its barrier creation would run dry, and its body would be exposed to his aggression. This might take an hour or two, but it would happen eventually. Thus, it decided to go all out and use its strongest ability, seeking to overpower him at once. Whoosh! The golden sand underneath them started to withdraw rapidly towards its scales. The serpent was trying to recreate the same sandstorm as before. Although it wouldn't be as potent as the one it created vs Charming Sky's minions due to the low content of sand in the area. Still, it was enough to rip Felix to shreds. At last. Thank you in advance. Instead of feeling worried, Felix grinned and switched his blue aura to light yellow, making the serpent regain its senses back, but in turn, its body got immobilized. Although the serpent laid on the ground motionless, the sandstorm didn't stop from building up. The cracks on the scales were paralyzed while they were open. So the sand kept on withdrawing without stopping, recreating the same horrifying scene as before. The spectators and Zoe were both confused at this scene. They had no idea why he paralyzed the serpent if its attack wasn't going to be stopped. They didn't know if he forgot that bloodliners and beasts only needed a thought to activate or stop their abilities. So, even if he paralyzed its body, the serpent wouldn't have trouble controlling the element of sand. Heck, it was much better if he kept the blue inducement active. At least, the beast mentality would affect it from bringing the full potential of the sandstorm. Doubts about Landlord misplaying were coursing through their mind. They truly believed that he screwed up big time on this one. However, the moment they saw the hardened sand barriers falling apart rapidly, and Felix's leg that was lifted straight above its head akin to an executioner planning to behead a sinner, dots were connected in their mind, bringing them to one conclusion. The serpent was now completely defenseless against Felix's behemoth strength. Only now did they understand that it was a huge mistake for the serpent to give up on its defenses and switch to a fence near Felix. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number -2 _48493103581024325 for visiting. After all, the only reason it was surviving his onslaught was due to its barriers, which were being created by the desert. But after commanding its withdrawal, every sand particle would focus only on entering its scales, completely leaving it N.A.K.E.D to Felix's aggression. No wonder he said thank you. It truly did him a favor of not wasting his time and energy. But honestly, what other choice did it have? Its defenses were bound to be destroyed sooner or later, it was just a matter of time. Would it take minutes? Or hours? The serpent was indignant about remaining passive and waiting for damned fate to arrive. Thus, it decided to risk it all in one attack. Unfortunately, it didn't know that the entire reason why Felix chose the blue aura instead of the paralyze aura, was to give it this sense of hope that its final attack could turn things around. Not to mention that he didn't use his full strength in his punches and kicks before, so it would underestimate his behemoth strength. Everything was just a big fat bait to loot it outside of its turtle shells, so Felix could land one single deadly attack to end this battle. He understood that if he didn't bait it out, he would have to fight for at least a couple of hours before destroying its sand barriers. Felix saw it live in his previous life, how of impossible endeavor to kill the terror serpent on its own desert. His clanmates struggled for 6 hours straight before slaying it, and the only reason that happened was that the desert dried out, leaving the serpent N.A.K.E.D to their attacks. Felix wasn't stupid to repeat the same mistake, thus he had to give it a false sense of hope, and the paralyzed debuff wasn't going to achieve so. Since the serpent's strongest attack relied on its scales. But, when it gets paralyzed, it wouldn't be able to open them anymore, which meant the sandstorm would be countered successfully. The serpent's bestial instincts weren't enough to account for all of this hidden scheming. Unfortunately, it had to pay the price of its decision by facing Felix's 2800 BF leg that could explode its head like a watermelon. Boom! Crack! The golden scales that were protecting the serpent head didn't last for a split second before shattering into small pieces after Felix brought his heel from above, slamming its head into the floor. But he didn't pause even a second to catch his breath, as he continued to land fist after fist on the ruined serpent's head, uncaring about the sandstorm, which was ripping his clothes and leaving long scratches on every inch of his body. Bam! 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 The sound of his fist making contact with the serpent's skull kept resounding thunderously even inside the raging sandstorm. Creeped out, the spectators flinched each time they heard that sound. They had no idea how the serpent's face would be like after he finishes his brutal onslaught. The damned storm in his back were blocking their vision from seeing it. The only thing they managed to glimpse it was the golden blood that was being sprayed and splashed around the area, painting Felix's body with gold and red glimmer after both of their drops of blood mixed up together. Thankfully, they didn't need to wait long as the sandstorm finally broke into light particles, marking the death of the terror serpent. However, before they could cheer for this spectacular replay, they saw that his fists never stopped striking down, even though the serpent's body already disintegrated. It seemed that Landlord was in frenzy trance. Zoe could only suggest that after seeing his strange behavior. She was quite positive about her guess, as she had seen it happen many times before. Players entering a trance after losing the majority of their energy, both mental and elemental. So Felix's actions were excusable in her eyes. He should break out of it after a couple of minutes. Zoe pressed on the small screen planning to skip it. However, her finger froze in a sweeping animation after her top-notch eyes glimpsed at the forgotten shadow on the wall squirm slightly, sending unnoticeable ripples. No one else besides Zoe saw those tiny ripples. The spectators were busy arguing whether the terror serpent was stronger than the Iron Titan based on what they just witnessed. Excited and thrilled, she retracted her finger, not wanting to skip the replay anymore. It was finally time for the idols' battle to begin. Although, based on Felix's appearance, Zoe believed that it wouldn't be called a battle, but just a single ambush, turning Felix into a porcupine after shadow spikes land on him. "You were a good sport, landlord, but it's time for you to grace down the stage." Her eyes had a hint of sympathy, as she stared at Felix, who was still punching the floor with bloodied knuckles like a madman, uncaring about his surrounding. Chapter 142, Was he faking it or not? "Thank you for the chest, Mr. Landlord." Bewildered, the spectators, who were in a heated argument, suddenly lifted their heads and gazed at the screen after hearing that sarcastic comment. The only ones who didn't bother lifting their heads were Mastermania's fan club. Heck, their eyes were roaming everywhere except landing on the screen to watch their idol. One could only wonder what the hell happened before, for them to react like this. Meanwhile, Felix's fans were guffawing and chortling at the sight of Mastermania exiting from the shadows with arms behind his back in an aloof manner. The others near them kept giving them weird glances, not knowing if they were really Landlord's fans. After all, it was clear for everyone that Mastermania wasn't coming in peace. So, why the hell weren't they worried? Sigh, Mastermania truly struck at the worst possible timing for Landlord. Zoe zoomed the replay on Mastermania's facial features, showcasing a few throbbing veins on his forehead. No matter how much he tried to act aloof and remain calm, his body was giving him away. However, this time it appeared like he didn't plan to control his emotions anymore. He was going for the kill, and he wanted to make sure that it was streamed and captured properly, so no other moron dared to humiliate him in public again. "Nothing personal," he said. It would have sounded more believable if he wasn't smirking slightly as he approached Felix, who was still on a frenzy trance, bashing the floor with blood dripping from every inch of his body. The sound of his punches was loud enough it was heard on the other side of the wall. Spooked out from this horrifying sight, Mastermania stopped advancing after putting 10 meters between them. The image of Felix soloing the terror serpent was still playing on his mind vividly. Thus, he wasn't planning to underestimate him. Although it was clear that Felix was a free target to his shadow spikes, he still planned to think this out before committing. After all, his ability maximum range was 5 meters. This meant, he had to enter Felix's aura zone if he wanted to attack. I should use Shadowling's cloak as an escape route. As an idol, survival was everything to him. So, before he made a move he always had to leave a way out, and the Shadowling's cloak was the best technique he bought from his clan for this scenario. Without delay, he created 50 small Shadowlings and ordered them to hold hands, forming a long chain connected with the shadow in the wall and his shadow. No wonder it was named as such. It turned out, the basic idea of the technique was to keep the user always connected with a shadow away from him. So, when things get ugly, he could just submerge in his shadow and reach the wall within a blink of an eye. This technique was clearly a combination of his passive ability Shadow Cloak and active ability Shadowlings. Despite its sophistication, the spectators who never saw this technique before didn't know whether to laugh or cry, as the chain somewhat resembled a safety rope in their eyes. What made the sight even funnier was the fact that Mastermania was taking such an extreme measurement against a mindless player. He is finally making a move. He must be quick, Landlord would wake up from his trance in just a few more seconds. Zoe wasn't kidding around, as Felix was truly showing signs of regaining consciousness. His punching speed slowing down made it quite obvious. Mastermania also didn't miss those signs and decided to stop worrying and just go for it. He narrowed his eyes and held his breath as a precaution. Then he suddenly dashed forward with his palm extended towards Felix. He reached 5 meters instantly. Tisk! However, before he could activate his shadow spikes, he saw Felix pause his madness in a calm manner and snap his finger. Whoosh! An acid-colored aura erupted out of Felix's pores and engulfed both of them in a split second. Ah! Mastermania's face couldn't help but twist, as he screamed out loud from having his entire skin being melted. Too bad, he shouldn't have opened his mouth, as Felix threw a light yellow bomb next to his face, forcing him to breathe in the inducement. His face froze in an even uglier look than the time he got humiliated by Felix during the interviews. This time, his mouth was wide open with his facial skin melting down, resembling the mask worn in the movie Scream. Dumbstruck, Zoe and the spectators' eyes widened at how fast things derailed from their expectations. They honestly didn't know if Felix faked his trance to bait Mastermania or simply he was lucky to wake up right before he got ambushed. Let him go. Felix couldn't help but jump backward after seeing an incoming large-sized fireball. His forceful dodge helped Mastermania leave the range of his acidic aura, as he was merely 3 meters away from its limits. Withdrew. Mortified and anguished, Mastermania submerged himself in his shadow, reaching the wall in an instant after traveling through his shadowling's chain. Although he was paralyzed, he only needed a clear thought to activate his escape ability, and the immense pain he was feeling before was ruining his focus and concentration constantly. Sigh, why did you have to intervene? Felix dusted his ripped open outfit and stared coldly at Miss Sissy right in her eyes. You saved him, but who is going to save you? He created 2 acidic bombs and approached the petrified girl, who only realized that she shouldn't have provoked this humanoid walking beast after the deed was already done. Scared shitless, she kept creating firebombs and throwing them in Felix's direction, hoping to scare him off. Unfortunately for her, Felix easily dodged them by sidestepping continuously. Abilities like those that needed to be thrown were better accompanied by larger strength. Otherwise, no matter how strong the ability, if it couldn't hit the target then it was as useless as a knitted condom. Mastermania, help me! She yelled out loud while heading towards the shadow in the wall, where Mastermania was last seen. However, not a single sound responded to her cry for help. Agitated, she kept touching the shadow, hoping that Mastermania was merely acting dead to ambush Landlord. You can stop. Felix cracked his bloodied knuckles and said, I saw him leave the moment you saved him. He chuckled mockingly, he didn't even turn his head while doing so. No. You lying. She leaned against the wall with her legs shaking and murmured, we agreed to combine our strengths if he couldn't win against you alone. Nonchalant, Felix cleaned his ear with a finger and said, I don't care about your plan with your lover. The only thing I care about now is to compensate myself for losing 200 GP. Please don't kill me. I can partner up with you. Miss Sassy immediately chose Plan C after seeing that her situation was getting dire. She didn't want to believe what he said about Mastermania, but the fact that her crush and partner didn't even bother to make his presence heard was clear proof that he truly ditched her to die. Heck, she even had to give up on Plan B, as she understood clearly that escape against Felix was impossible after she saw his inhuman speed during his battle with the serpent. She truly regretted saving Mastermania in the first place. If only she kept acting invisible like before, Felix would have probably not targeted her. But now, she could only hope that her pitiful look touches Felix's heart and spare her. Too bad, one acidic bomb exploding next to her face, removed those wishful thoughts from her mind. Org! She shrieked as she held her face between her palms. Yet, even her hand's skin was corroding as well. The acid bomb was truly the deadliest inducement Felix had shown so far. But Felix could only rely on it against targets who saw his bloodline since they could easily counter his other inducements by holding their breaths. Meanwhile, acid inducement affected the skin, uncaring about getting absorbed directly into the body system. Plus, it gave another bonus, which was forcing the affected to stop holding his breath due to the pain. Just like what happened against Mastermania. Felix knew that Mastermania was 100% going to hold his breath, even if he saw him with his guards down. Thus, any other inducement would have been ineffective in his ambush. The only downside about it was the unnecessary pain caused for the affected. Felix wasn't that psycho to torture any player he met without a bone to pick with him. Thus, he sprinted towards Miss Sassy and immediately penetrated her brain with his index finger, getting her out of that misery. You could only blame yourself for trusting a full-fledged idol. He shook his head while closing her eyelids, hiding her dull eyes. Felix wasn't trying to offset the guilt of killing her by switching the blame or anything. He killed so many times in his previous life, he was already past the stage of feeling guilty after killing strangers in the games. He truly meant what he said to Miss Sissy, and for a good reason as well. It was a known fact that idols were split into two types. Idols like Felix, who simply play to the best of their abilities, and fans embrace it. Those fans create a fan club on their own and take everything related to their idols on their own shoulders without getting a single cent in the process. On the other hand, there were idols like Mastermania, who had their own public agencies. Those agencies were responsible for creating fan clubs, taking care of their social media accounts, helping them gain popularity by spreading their previous highlights, and more of such marketing gimmicks. All of this just to increase the streaming revenue percentage on each game. So for agencies like those, it was impossible for them to invest in a player that had zero sense of safety, or in other words, a reckless honorable player who wouldn't hesitate to put himself in harm's way for his partner. No sir. What they want was simply a cowardly player, who would do anything to survive without a hint of hesitation, and Mastermania fit the bill perfectly. He was handsome, charming, had cool-looking abilities that allow him to kill, track, and even escape. Not to mention, his serious take on his safety that was on borders of utter cowardness. All of this made him the perfect example of how a full-fledged idol should be and behave. The only downside about this was the fact that it was nigh impossible for those idols to find strong partners to ally with them inside the games. After all, there were absolutely no benefits in doing so for them. First, the idols always had a big fat target on their head in every single game, making it hell for anyone who desired to lay low, when partnering with them. Second, if the MC decided to focus the camera on them, the spectator's interest target would always be the idol. The last, and most important reason, the idols were f***ing untrustworthy. If partnering with other players had a 50/50th chance of getting betrayed and stabbed in the back, then partnering with idols literally had 100%, no questions asked. The moment shit gets real, they would be the first to bail without bothering to hide their intentions. So who in his right mind would want to put himself in that position? Miss Sassy might have been charmed by Mastermania into forgetting all of this, or she was simply disinterested in researching tips and tricks on Supremacy Games. Whatever it was, she paid for that mistake with her life. Chapter 143, Incoming Bounty on Felix's Head. That concluded Landlord's replay. Zoe wiped some drops of sweat on her forehead at this replay that was full of ups and downs. She truly regretted focusing on Princess Bird instead of her gold-laying goose Felix, who never failed to deliver outstanding performance. Let's see how Mastermania is doing after he escaped. She quickly removed the replay and swiped her finger on Mastermania's small screen. Look and behold! Mastermania was wearing a pitch-black outfit that had a hoodie covering his hair. As for his face, he got it hidden behind a pitch-black mask, showing only his bloodshot eyes. He is probably hiding this look. Zoe giggled with a hidden sadistic glint on her eyes, as she displayed Mastermania's face after it got melted by Felix's acid inducement. Ouch! Creeped out and somewhat sympathetic, the spectators drew in a deep breath at the sight of that hideous face on the screen. They knew that Mastermania's agency was going to have trouble recovering from this. Who were they kidding? Their idol face, his most prized possession, was disfigured beyond recognition, leaving him inside the game to roam wearing a mask and a hoodie to hide his burnt-off marks on his head. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number S head, _485851417773845545 for visiting. There was absolutely no coming back from this. The stream chat already spread the image in every corner of the network, making Mastermania a laughingstock to anyone who missed this game. Heck, there were even some who tuned in the stream just because of it. No wonder Mastermania's fans were embarrassed. They already foresaw this happening before Zoe played the replay. The majority of them already ditched the club the moment they saw Mastermania's face melt in front of their eyes. The image was too much for them to handle. While the rest were somewhat hesitant about doing the same, as they knew that Mastermania's appearance would return to its original state after the game was over. However, after seeing the great fanfare his hideous face caused on the network, their hesitation drifted in the air, as they immediately ditched the club as well. Their decision was completely understandable, as, by the time the game ends, Mastermania's face would be planted on every media platform. And there was no way in hell they would stay to associate themselves with him. There was plenty of handsome fish in the sea to support. Meanwhile, Landlord's fans' reason for laughing their asses off before, was because Mastermania taunted Felix during the interview segment, saying that he was going to show him a new version of himself. The spectators might have forgotten, but for them, it was always on their mind, waiting to see what he meant by a new version. In the end, the only thing they saw was his face getting melted like that, showcasing a truly new version. It might not be what he meant, but he stayed true to his promise, and that's what mattered. Landlord didn't kill him, but he made sure to destroy everything about him. Zoe sighed and said, I doubt that his agency would keep him around after this CLU.S.turf*ck. She coughed, excuse my language. Her prediction was completely right. As, at this moment, the agent responsible for Mastermania's management was sitting in a half-destroyed VIP room with veins throbbing on his neck and forehead constantly. *************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** He covered his eyes with his hands, not wanting to see Mastermania's hideous face on the screen anymore. Although he was Mastermania's manager, he wasn't biased towards his own people. After all, they only shared a business relationship between them, and he was definitely not going to get emotionally invested in something that was business-related. The only reason he raged in the first place was because of Mastermania's foolishness of not sticking with the protocol, which clearly stated that he had to avoid fighting with strong players like Felix at all costs. The protocol helped him survive through the games in one piece every time. But, he had to act on his own this time and ruin everything they built within an instant. I should probably apply for a newbie player this time. He sighed, at least they would be easier to control. Somewhat calm, he stood up and began fixing his messed up tie in front of a holographic mirror, displaying his entire body in peak quality. A few moments later, he teleported outside of the stadium. There was nothing much to see anymore for him. The one, who he was here for, was being showered by mocking laughs and sympathetic sighs. I will make you regret the day you were born. Just wait, you bastard. Mastermania lowered his hoodie even further, hiding his narrowed bloodshot eyes, and thought, you might have ruined my future, but my agency will make sure to put a bounty on your head if I said so. Although, Mastermania knew that his future was doomed inside the agency, and probably even as an idol after what happened to him. But, he was still pretty confident that his agency would put a bounty on Felix's head based on his request. It wasn't because he had a high standing in the agency or to help him out of their goodwill. They would do so because Mastermania planned to leave them no choice. If Felix defeated Mastermania and left him be, or even killed him, the agency wouldn't give a crap about it at all. They had hundreds of idols and upcoming ones desperate to replace the older generation. Mastermania was merely one of them. However, when Felix ruined his face, or in other words, his future as an idol without killing him, he created a massive headache for them. As of now, Mastermania's market value was absolute garbage without any way to salvage it. Yet, they still needed to waste resources on marketing and helping him get more exposure just like before. Simply because they were bound by a contract that could be terminated only if he died or broke its terms. Mastermania neither was he dead nor did he break his end of the contract. This meant, he was within his rights to benefit fully from their assistance without care if he brought them more percentage revenue during the games or none. He was literally the real meaning of a freeloader, getting all benefits without doing anything. Yet, Mastermania planned to give up on all of this, only if his agency put a heavy bounty on Felix's head. He was confident about them agreeing, as it was much better to lose a couple of $100 million on a bounty than to waste almost $1 billion or more on his marketing. After all, with his C.O.C. Crouch play style, he was probably going to survive even the deadliest games. Let's see how you are going to deal with tens of players, aiming at your head in every game you join. He smiled diabolically with half of his mouth exposing his black teeth inside. Good thing the mask hid it pretty well. Otherwise even the sympathetic sighs he was receiving would turn into disgusting spits. But honestly, if those spectators knew that he was planning to put a bounty on Felix's head, forget about spitting on him, they would throw their shoes, uncaring if they hit him or the ones sitting in front of them. The term bounty was forbidden in the SG platform, and for a good reason as well. Personal bounties on players ruined the gameplay for everyone. The players, the MCS, and especially the spectators. After all, if a player had a 500 million SC bounty on his head, it meant that he was a moving cash pig on the battleground. Any player who killed him would turn rich instantly. Plus, he was not even breaking the rules or anything. He was simply playing naturally. It would be all fine and dandy if those bounties were on top of most hated players' heads, but if the opposite was true, no one would be able to handle the spectators' outrage. There were cases before when players, who had almost billions of fans galaxy-wide getting targeted by hundreds of players in one game due to having a couple of billions SC bounty on their heads. What else could they do besides dying? No matter how strong their bloodline abilities were, no one could contest against hundreds of players who had the same level of strength as him. So, getting a bounty that big was the same as putting a death sentence on a beloved player for everyone. One could only imagine the outrage those cases caused. If their player died fair and square within the games, they would simply mourn for him a bit and move on, but when his cause of death was a bounty, something that was clearly based on a personal vendetta that had nothing to do with the games, it was unforgivable action. The SG Rules Committee was on the same page with the spectators on this one, as they had officially banned the use of bounties and put strict rules forbidding anyone from doing so. For anyone caught in the act, death would be the least of his worry, as in some serious cases, the punishment could spread to the family members and even the future generations of the offender. The Supremacy Games' integrity must not be dirted by the filth outside of its walls. Unfortunately, regardless of the ban and those heavy punishments, bounties were still being used secretly to this day. Hell, there was even a website created in the dark network, to collect those bounties and display them to the players who planned to earn quick coins inside their games. They just had to ask the Queen to find a match from the endless bounties list on the website with the list in the game they were about to participate in. They had nothing to lose at all. They were planning to fight and kill anyway, better know if they had a bounty head on their game to not miss such a juicy free target. The reason Felix never bothered to check the bounty website in the Darknet although he knew of its existence, was because the first game had only bronze players and newbies that no one would bother to target. As for this game, the wager was his top priority, exceeding even the championship priority. Don't even mention chasing after bounties. Although, it might seem like those rules and punishments changed absolutely nothing. But in reality, they affected only the high-profiled players who could cause a massive outrage solo. As for a pleb like Felix who played only 2 games, he wasn't that hot yet for him to cause outrage and force the SG committee to take his upcoming bounty seriously. Thus, he was on his own, dealing with the repercussions of not straight away killing Mastermania. Just because he wore a mask and had his identity hidden, it didn't mean that he could offend whoever he wished without being dealt with properly inside the UVR. There were plenty of ways to take care of him besides getting a bounty. It just depended if the offended knew about them or not. The UVR and SG were oceans that even Felix with 2 lives, was still without a single clue about their infinite secrets. Chapter 144, The Second Shuffle. Let's see what landlord is up to now. After Zoe saw that Master Mania wasn't making any moves, but merely walking towards a specific direction inside the maze, she removed the camera on him, planning to check on landlord's position and condition after that battle. Peep. Peep. However, just as she tried to swipe her finger, the maze's shuffle alarm resounded in her ears, forcing her to lift her chin and gaze at the automatic reverse countdown on the large screen. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _48611959033094351 for visiting. 30 minutes had already gone by since the first shuffle. It seems that I lost track of time. She smiled sheepishly at such a rookie mistake and highlighted the current ranking of the wager to attract their attention away, so she could avoid getting bad-mouthed. / Rank 1, Landlord, GP, 5300. Rank 2, Bird's Call, GP, 3400. Rank 3, Sprite Visage, GP, 2100. Rank 4, Solar Mist, GP, 2000. Rank 5, Hound Stench, GP, 1900. Rank 6, Pure Muscle, GP, 1850. Rank 7, Charming Sky, GP, 1450. Rank 8, Mastermania, GP, 1300. Rank 9, Feeling Good, GP, 950. Rank 10, Blades Hail GP, 950//. As expected, Charming Sky fell straight to the bottom after her attempt to slay the serpent failed miserably, as she used the majority of her energy without any returns. Thus, her disqualification from the wager was normal. Meanwhile, Mastermania fell from rank 7 to 8 and probably would continue falling just like Charming Sky. After all, he had many things on his mind currently than focusing on a lost wager. He knew, and probably everyone else knew as well, that there was simply no way to catch up to Felix after he bypassed the 5k GP mark. Even Princess Bird, who had the highest hope of doing so, was currently sitting on the chest she opened and watching a recorded movie in her bracelet. What else could she do? If Charming Sky had 20% energy remaining, then Princess Bird was literally broke with only 2% or 3% in her tank. Thus, she decided to chill in her position until the game end. Peep. Immediately after hearing the last alert's warning, Zoe removed the ranking list and switched the camera to Felix, hoping that he was entangled in something worthy to be viewed. Too bad her hopes were dashed after seeing him standing all alone within a 500-meter diameter. There was absolutely no one near him. Not even a beast. She wasn't the only one disappointed at this, as even Felix was sighing at the desolate view he was seeing after the walls opened up in order to shuffle. Whatever, might as well sprint towards the chest. There is not much time before the game ends. That was indeed the best current decision to make at this moment, as to reach the chest Felix needed to run at least for half an hour continuously without pausing to engage in side fights. However, this was an esteemed based on the current path he was on. After the wall reshuffle again, the path might get longer or shorter. It depends on his luck. Plus, his energy was probably not going to support him having side fights anyway after he wasted 40% just to deal with that troublemaker serpent. Thus, Felix had to ignore everything in his path and focus only on reaching the legendary chest. After a while, the walls finished rearranging themselves, leaving the players who were in close proximity to the exit scratch their heads in confusion about where to go. If it wasn't for those shuffles, the game would have ended in the first 30 minutes, leaving Felix and the rest in the wager no tears to cry after throwing the championship for no benefits at all. Thankfully, after this shuffle, the game should last for a while. But only if a player didn't luck out on an ability as Felix found inside the hidden compartment, or teleport near the exit. Who knows? This game might end just in a couple of minutes after this shuffle. Everything was possible in a puzzle-type game. I hope the path shortened or at least remained the same. Felix withdrew the scroll from his bracelet and unrolled it before him. Lucky bastard! Thank God! Totally ignoring Asna's remark, he sighed in relief after seeing that the path towards the chest shortened substantially, removing a quite large amount of twists to make it in a somewhat straight line. He didn't know how long it would take now to reach the chest, but he was pretty sure that it wouldn't exceed 20 minutes. I memorized it, you can go now. Without further delay, he retrieved the scroll after hearing Asna's confirmation. He then stretched his legs a bit and sprinted forward like there was no tomorrow. 15 to 20 minutes of running was quite a hefty duration to sprint in it. But, Felix was quite confident in his stamina to pull it off. After Zoe saw that he planned to run directly towards the chest, she switched the camera to a more interesting happening near the exit of the maze. Confused and muddled, her head couldn't help but tilt a bit at the weird ongoing situation that she was watching. The spectators also had no idea what the hell was wrong with the players to act in that strange manner. However, after hearing what one of them said, they couldn't help but drew a deep gasp at such a terrifying scheme, aiming at Felix. Suddenly, a barrage of boos and insults were thrown towards the players responsible for that scheme. The spectators all had flushed cheeks from anger, as they kept cursing at the top of their voice. They clearly didn't like what they saw or heard one bit. Meanwhile, Felix, uncaring about anything, continued his sprint with ragged breaths and somewhat of a shaky form. He was paying attention to only one thing, and that was Asna's voice, as she kept guiding him through the paths. Are we close yet? He asked while wiping his sweaty forehead. He already bypassed the 15 minutes mark, and the chest was still nowhere to be seen. Nonetheless, he did meet with a few beasts on the way. For the common and uncommon beasts, he completely ignored them, while for the rare beasts, he only targeted them if he found that he could slay them without being a drag. On the other hand, he never bothered with the players he met on the way. He simply bypassed them without giving a single glance in their direction. The players were quite cooperative with him, as they didn't dare to let a fart in his presence. They merely buried their heads in their chest and submerged themselves with the walls akin to chameleons. They were not acting cowardly or anything, but merely showing Felix his due respect after establishing his dominance inside the maze. The two fireworks were still fresh in their mind. Thus, it was better to not provoke him and continue playing their own game peacefully. Yep. Just a few turns and we will reach the X mark. Asna nodded her head and said, turn left, right and continue in a straight line. The X mark is at the very end of that line. All right, thank you. After receiving a positive confirmation, Felix slowed his pace gradually until he began jogging in a relaxed manner. His pace switch was a smart move to do since his body desperately needed recovery after his continuous sprint. Felix wasn't stupid to fight a legendary beast while being dead tired. He wasn't even confident in his ability to slay the beast when he was at his peak. Don't even mention doing it in this condition. Legendary beasts were on an entirely different league than epic beasts. If it wasn't for so, the bloodlines of legendary beasts would not have a 10 times market price than epic bloodlines. Felix, who struggled to win against even an epic tier 2 beast, was expecting the upcoming fight to only increase in difficulty, and by a quite large margin. Thus, he was taking his preparation in a serious manner. To the point, he was planning to give up battling the beast if its type was unfavorable against his abilities, such as the mental type. If mental abilities users gave him trouble, then a mental legendary beast could flat out turn his brain into mush instantly. It wasn't even a fair fight. Felix understood that clearly as well. One should always fight based on his strengths and weaknesses, and Felix's bloodline still wasn't strong enough to cover everything, even though it belonged to a primogenitor. The last thing he wanted was to be C.O.C.Ky due to his overpowered bloodline and get himself killed. After a while, Felix reached the end of the path, where the beast was supposed to be. However, his infrared vision only fed him an image of a medium-sized chest, glowing brightly like a mini-sun. As for the beast that was supposed to guard it, it was nowhere to be seen. A bit spooked, he took a step back and pushed his vision to the limit, hoping to spot the beast. He looked to his left and right, nothing. He looked underneath the ground, still nothing. He raised his head and glanced above him. Holy shit! Awestruck and somewhat excited, Felix gaped at the monstrous sight above him. Chapter 145, The Triple Mother Spider. He turned off his infrared vision as it was merely showing a red halo around the beast, and not its true shape. Immediately after turning it off, he couldn't help but laugh at the sight before him. Zoe, who learned her lesson of keeping Felix's movement in her plain sight at all times, heard his out-of-place laugh from his small screen. However, before she could even lay her eyes on him, that laugh turned into a joyful out-loud laugh, then a deranged laugh accompanied by coughs. Now she was truly bewildered and curious about what was going on for him to react like that. She never assumed before that Felix, who never showed an ounce of mercy to anyone, would have such a human-like laugh. Zoe, stop bothering about the happening near the exit and put her entire focus on Felix. What the hell? Speechless, she saw him laughing while pointing his finger at a gigantic pitch-black spider with hundreds of red shimmering eyes all over its body, 20 long hairy legs, and spherical oversized abdomen. She had no idea what he saw funny about the Triple Mother Spider. A legendary Tier 2 beast that was known for its fluid control over silk, all-seeing eyes, and especially its deadly venom that could kill second-stage bloodliners with a single whiff. The only plausible reason that came up in her mind was that Felix thought it was funny for silver-ranked game to have such a monstrosity within it. After all, she understood pretty clearly that no one was going to slay this beast or any other legendary beasts inside the maze. Not even Felix. An Origin Purity bloodliner slaying a legendary Tier 2 beast? Anyone who had such a foolish idea in his mind must visit a therapist to check on his mental health. What a joke! The Triple Spider needed at least a team of 10 peak first-stage bloodliners with abilities that counter its element, just to have a fair chance to slay it. Thus, for Felix, who was all by himself against it, Zoe never entertained the idea that he would fight it. She always believed that he was going to retreat the moment his eyes laid on the mother spider. That's why, she never bothered to speak or mention the scroll he found, even though she knew of its content. There was no need to expose him or embarrass him in public, as there was nothing to ashamed of in his situation. The beast simply surpassed the strength bar in this game by a mile. Too bad for her, things just got weirder after she heard him say, "So f.u.c.k.i.n.g lucky. What the hell is he thinking about?" She murmured under her breath while swiping her finger on his small screen, planning to switch the camera focus from the ongoing happening near the exit to him. "How could you be so lucky?" Surprised, Asna raised an eyebrow slightly at the sight of the mother spider hung upside down with its legs attached to a silky string, coming from its rear. "Hee, must be good karma for sparing those players on the way." Felix wiped his tears from laughing that hard and smiled smugly. "How could a good-natured person like me not be favored by the goddess of luck?" Tisk, she clicked her tongue irritatedly and said, "I bet you still will lose this fight even with your poison immunity." Felix stopped joking around after hearing what she said, as he also figured just as much. He might feel that he was pretty lucky to end up with a beast that he was able to counter properly with his passive poison immunity, but it didn't mean it would an easy fight. Not even close. As a veteran poison user in his previous life, Felix had to read and learn about the majority of poison beasts in the known universe. Of course, he wasn't able to learn everything, but still, he managed to enhance his library to include the majority of beasts, which were easily recognizable and infamous, like the Triple Mother Spider. Thus, he understood quite a few details about it. One of them was the real reason it was named as such after it was discovered. As based on what he read in his clan's bestial library, the Mother Spider was originally named the 100-eyed Mother Spider. But, after it kept causing revulsion, nausea, panic attacks, and more symptoms of trypophobia to the hunters, due to its CLU.S. tiered red eyes, the name was changed to its currently known one. It was a much better term to associate the spider with. Good thing Felix wasn't suffering from trypophobia as well, otherwise, the moment he approached the spider and saw those disgusting clu.s.tiered eyes, he would probably have a panic attack straightway. How am I supposed to bring it down though? He scratched his chin and asked Asna, do you have any ideas? Nope. Useless. Not as much as you. She scoffed. Not wanting to enter another bickering round with her, Felix leaned on the wall, away from the territory of the spider to not attract its aggro this early. He then rested his chin under his hand, pondering on the most efficient method that would help him bring the fight to the ground. He understood that his bombs were totally useless against this beast, due to its high poison resistance. It might not be a total immunity as his, but it was enough to lower his inducement effect duration from 5 seconds to merely 2 or even 1 second. That duration was definitely not enough to land a deadly attack on it while having more than 60 meters separating them. Thus, he had to somehow bring the fight within 8 meters, in order to use his aura. After all, it wouldn't matter if the beast had a peak poison resistance, as long as it entered his aura and kept staying in it, the inducement would continue affecting it constantly until it either dies or leaves its range. The only dilemma was how to do so without losing his entire energy in the process. Felix knew that he couldn't repeat the same reckless way of fighting with the serpent. As, just to slain it, he had wasted more than 35% energy. Heck, all the battles he went through since the moment he joined the game, didn't even make him waste more than 15%, including the battle with the Titan Iron Beast. But what else could he have done? The serpent wasn't like the Titan, who had such a glaring weakness. Felix had to keep delaying the serpent from creating the desert somehow before Master Mania decided to make his move, and being constantly on offense was the only way. However, the mother spider would never drop from the kingdom of silk it created between two walls, and enter a melee battle with Felix. It didn't matter if he threw 1 bomb or 100, it would keep staying in its favorable environment for eternity, not worried at all about wasting its energy on sustaining its silky web. Simply because her web wasn't relying on energy in the first place. After all, as a spider-type beast, silk manipulation was an evolutionary-based ability that all spiders had in the universe. Whether common ranked or legendary. Thus, freely manipulating silk was natural behavior to the mother spider. It was just common sense. Anaconda strangling its prey was a normal occurrence, but anaconda spewing fire wasn't. However, the bloodliner was able to inherit both of those abilities whether they were evolutionary types or inherited from ancestral primogenitors. The perfect example was the terror serpent that had the sand element. If it was up to the serpent, it would have done the same as the mother spider and created a desert around it, before getting forced to by its enemies. However, it was clearly an impossible endeavor, as the desert consumed a hefty amount of energy each second it existed because it was a primogenitor ability. This was the reason, the serpent always had to create it in every battle and also retrieve it, as an intelligent finishing blow. Low-tiered beasts might not be that smart, but they sure had a full understanding of their strengths and weaknesses, even more so than a bloodliner with the same element and abilities, and Felix, who had knowledge of all of this, always made sure to either target the beast's weakness or at least remove a part of its core strength. Thus, before he found a solid plan to drag the mother spider into the dirt with him, he would not move an inch from his spot. The only ones who were unsatisfied by his inactivity were the spectators and Zoe, who thought that Felix was going to show them a heated battle by challenging the spider, or at least make a fool of himself and walk away. But what the f***ck was going on here? He was leaning on the wall with a hand rubbing his chin gently and the other in his pocket for over 3 minutes now. If the mother spider wasn't swinging from one place to another silently above his head, they would have honestly thought that Felix didn't notice it and was merely chilling just like Princess Bird. Unbeknownst to them, Felix's brain was working at full capacity, trying to create the perfect plan. In fact, during those 3 minutes, he already found a way to force the mother spider down. Yet, he still preferred taking more time, to make his plan foolproof. Can you just fight it already? Asna wrapped a curl around her finger in utter boredom and said, your plan is good enough to slay it in 10 minutes. Well, it's never bad to think thoroughly about your actions. Felix pulled his hand from his pocket and created one acid bomb. But, you are right. He smirked, my plan is beyond solid. The moment the spectators saw him creating that bomb, they knew that Felix wasn't planning to give up on the glittering legendary chest. Whoosh! Poof! Felix didn't disappoint their expectations, as he threw the acid bomb towards, unexpectedly the silky white strings glued on the wall. SHSHSHS. Immediately after the bomb made contact with its target, hissing sounds resounded in the area, like a piece of meat getting fried on a pan. The sound was glaring and loud, forcing the mother spider that was hopping around before, to change direction and swing widely from the right side to the leftmost side within a moment. The instant she reached the area where the sound was coming from, she saw with its numerous eyes, the silky strings that supported her web, snap one by one inside a medium-sized cloud of acid green mist. However, before she could even investigate who caused this mess, the same glaring hissing sound resounded in her ears, coming from the right side. This time, her eyes were able to feed her a scene of a bug at the ground, constantly creating those bombs and using them as a way to ruin her magnificent web. Provoked, her bent pitch-black fangs snapped fiercely, sending sparks in the air, like two pieces of metal grinding against each other violently. Unbothered by her warning attempt, Felix kept throwing bombs at each spot on the wall that had strings attached to. Hissing sounds resonated all over the place, forcing the mother spider to swing around constantly, trying to alleviate the damages those bombs caused by weaving another string and linking it with her web against the wall. However, no matter how fast she weaved new strings and fixed a spot, Felix destroyed her efforts by focusing on the furthest position from her. But what truly made the mother spider livid was that the acid mist didn't evaporate after exploding, but spread apart, covering at least 3 meters around the area of contact, and remained for a few more seconds before disappearing. Those few seconds might not appear much to the spectators, but to the mother spider, they made it hell for her to remedy the web, as it was impossible to weave a string inside that acid cloud. Thus, the ideal positions on the walls kept on reducing one by one, leaving the mother spider, attaching her strings to unfavorable positions, sometimes above the web and oftentimes underneath it. This messed up way of fixing the web, destroyed its artistic beauty, and made it resemble a deformed piece of garbage like the web was made by an amateur and not a proud legendary beast. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _48635626450378562 for visiting. The spectators couldn't help but pity the mother spider, that was seething in rage over having her magnificent creation trashed like this. Even beasts weren't spared from landlord's bullying. Zoe gave a bitter smile and clarified, for Tripo mother spider to have its web beauty ruined like this, was the greatest humiliation for its species. Landlord truly provoked a beast he couldn't afford to face. She smirked slightly, clearly expecting Felix to suffer in this battle if not flat out drop dead by one bite from those vicious-looking fangs. Unbeknownst to her, Felix's entire plan was based on enraging the mother spider by ruining her web design mercilessly. Chapter 146, Poison Immunity in Play. If it was another spider species, they wouldn't mind having their web ruined. Hell, they wouldn't care even if it got destroyed, as they could easily recreate another one without wasting a single ounce of energy in the process. However, just like humans, beasts also had a reversed scale that mustn't be touched or insulted no matter what. For the mother spider, it was definitely her web. And the incensed screeches she kept releasing while facing Felix, were the best proof of so. Without warning, she jumped from her web and landed on the wall 10 meters above Felix's head. Just because, her web was ruined beyond recognition, making her discard it like some sort of trash, it didn't mean that it would jump next to Felix and fight it out with him in melee form. Tisk! You should have just saved me the effort. Somewhat annoyed, Felix clicked his tongue while creating inside his oversized pocket an azure blue bomb. He wasn't joking around when he said that his plan was foolproof, as he even prepared a way to negate the mother spider's reliability on sticking on walls. Felix wasn't stupid to not see it happening after he destroyed her web. But, he still preferred if she just dropped near him without wasting his time and energy to force it into happening. Careful! Worried, Felix's fan club all yelled out loud, at the sight of the mother spider, pointing her rear in Felix's direction, clearly preparing to launch an attack. However, their worry extinguished just as it lit up, after seeing Felix dodge sideways a pitch-black ball that was hurled from the spider abdomen rear. Yet, before they could sigh in relief, another ball was sent, then another, and another. It just kept going and going non-stop, like a machine gun firing away freely. Nonetheless, Felix dodged all of them easily, not getting affected in the slightest by her offense. The spectators got a bit skeptical at this weird sight. After all, the beast was supposed to be a legendary rank, thus it was simply impossible for her attacks to be this trashy. Hell, her attack was even worse than some rare ranked beasts they saw during this game. It just didn't make sense. Suddenly, the majority of the spectators recoiled back in their seats with shocked expressions after seeing the pitch-black balls all around Felix, began to quiver silently, not making a single sound in the process. Then unexpectedly, cracks slowly started to appear and spread on the surface of the balls, making them resemble birds' eggs on the verge of hatching. Too bad for Felix, that was exactly what happened. As the ball that was sent first, broke apart, revealing a mini version of the mother spider. Everything was exactly the same, from her tiered red eyes to her bent fierce-looking fangs. The only difference was the size, as the mini version only had the size of a human adu.l.t's head. If this small spiderling was the only one that hatched, the sight might actually appear cute. Alas, the rest of the eggs followed quickly after and began to hatch one by one, leaving the area around Felix surrounded with a sea of spiderlings, which were snapping their fangs continuously in a frenzy. If Landlord didn't escape their encirclement, he would certainly die. Zoe yelled with a hint of excitement and eagerness, wanting nothing more but to see him suffer. She was clearly confident in her prediction. The spectators might not understand why so, since she didn't explain herself, but Felix would totally see what she meant if he heard her, as he also understood that being inside those spiderlings' encirclement wasn't a good thing. Simply because they were not the mother spider children, brainless and plain stupid, but her own self copied with the same abilities and elements. This meant each spiderling could kill with a single venomous bite, just like it was done by the mother itself. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number _4875758983138278 for visiting. With this kind of ability, she didn't need to approach Felix at all, but just keep her distance and send copies of herself to do the deed, as long as the number of copies did not exceed 100. Since she could control them by linking each eye with one spiderling. Thus, the army wouldn't be disoriented and in a total mess, but attacking as one and retreating as one. Shriish! Immediately after dropping 100 eggs near Felix, the mother spider's tiered eyes all glowed with bright red light, sending dangerous vibes throughout the air. Simultaneously, the inactive spiderlings all began to make a move. 40% spread apart and surrounded Felix in an even wider circle, standing 10 meters away from him. 30% pointed their rear in his direction and started spewing silky white webs, trying to capture him. Finally, the last 30% jumped with their fangs tips glittering with dark green color, clearly planning to poison him. All of those orders were carried instantly and simultaneously without a single delay, and Felix, who was in the very middle of those attacks, just smirked and snapped his fingers casually like he wasn't in a life or death situation. Paralyze aura. Instantly, a light yellow mist emerged from his body's pores and engulfed all of the spiderlings, which were in its range. The ones who were jumping on him stiffened while mid-air. Meanwhile, the rest, who had their rear facing him, froze in their position as well, forcing them to pause spewing their webs. If their webs were an active ability based that relied on their energy, then Felix's paralyze aura wouldn't have affected their web creation in the slightest, since abilities only need thoughts to be activated and elemental energy. However, the spider's webs relied on their spinneret glands located at the tip of their abdomen, which is part of their body, and paralyze inducement affected the entire body. Nonetheless, Felix didn't escape unscathed from their offense, as he wasn't able to dodge the already spewed shower of webs. Landlord handled one attack but still got caught by the other. Zoe zoomed the camera on Felix, who was currently inside a tightly sealed cocoon, and shouted, "How would he escape this enter.a.p.im?" Before Zoe could even finish her sentence, a cloud of acid mist emerging from inside the cocoon, interrupted her. She and the spectators understood immediately that Felix was planning to corrode the cocoon just he did with the mother spider web. He didn't even turn off his paralyze aura, as he relied on simply one acid bomb to free himself swiftly. Immediately after breaking out, Felix started to viciously stomp his legs on the spiderlings blocking his way to the mother spider. Crunch! Crack! Bones were broken and skulls destroyed into a paste. Anything that met Felix's leg had a miserable ending. However, every dead spiderling he left behind him, turned into a cloud of mist a few seconds later and drifted towards the mother spider, who absorbed it gladly. A moment later, she began to hurl those black balls again in his direction, forcing him to stop advancing and focus on dodging. He truly should have left them alone, and just focused on dealing with the mother spider first. After all, no matter how many he killed, new ones would replace them swiftly, pushing the number to reach 100 again. If the spiderlings just disappeared immediately after dying, the mother spider wouldn't have been infamous for being one of the worst low-tiered poisonous beasts to hunt down effectively without losing too many hunters in the process. Sadly, that wasn't it. The number of the spiderlings never went beyond 100, and also beneath it. Felix knew so as well. Thus he completely ignored the immobilized spiderlings near him and drew closer to his real target, trying to use the bomb that was hidden in his pocket as fast as possible. Shriek! However, the mother spider wasn't planning on letting him break outside of the encirclement that easily, as it gave orders to the remaining 40% of spiderlings, which were staying outside of his aura domain, to collect the venom on their mouths and spit it in his direction. This wasn't even an ability but just counter-measurement to Felix's aura that blocked her minions from reaching his side to bite him. Despite her out-of-the-box method of attack, Felix wasn't bothered by the incoming shower of spit. He simply put his arms in front of his face in disgust and dashed right through the salvo of spit, unworried about getting affected by the venom. The hell is he doing? Zoe's eyes widen a bit, as she exclaimed, no matter how high his poison resistance, it wouldn't be able to fully nullify the effects. Too bad, her prediction this time was completely off the mark, as Felix broke outside of the encirclement while under the salvo of venom without a pause or letting a single yelp. Speechless, the spectators watched him wipe the dark green spit on his sleeves while mumbling under his breath, "Were you trying to disgust me to the death or what?" Chapter 147, Azure Inducement Effect. They honestly had no idea, if the mother spider venom was overrated, or Felix was simply a monster to have such a high poison resistance that was completely able to negate a legendary beast poison. Are my eyes playing a trick on me? Zoe rubbed her eyes awestruck at this sight, not daring to believe it, neither wanting to. Unlike those spectators who had simple knowledge about the mother spider, she had a full understanding of it, just like Felix. It was her job, after all, to have as much information as possible about the universe to be able to commentate professionally, and not stutter like a total amateur. Thus, she was well aware that what Felix just did was beyond amazing and on the border of absurdity. The mother spider poison was able to kill from just a single whiff, don't even mention getting touched by it directly. Even if she added Felix's high poison resistance to the mix, it simply meant that he was able to survive getting killed by it, but not escape the excruciating pain it caused to one's nerves. She couldn't help but zoom on his face, hoping to see if his expression twisted if just by a bit to ease her tremulous emotions. Unfortunately, the darkness under Felix's haughty blocked her attempt, leaving gritting her teeth in anger. Bastard! You must have immunity to poison. It can only be so. Annoyed, she bit her lower lip and enlarged the camera again, displaying both Felix and the mother spider staring at each other in silence. It was clear that the mother spider was at her wit's end on dealing with Felix, which was quite understandable honestly. After all, her greatest strength was based on her spiderling army, but Felix's abilities countered everything she used on him effortlessly, from her silk element that could be corroded easily by his acid inducement, to her infamous poison that was totally ignored by him like some sort of B-product. If she was dealing with anyone else besides Felix, she could have easily massacred them by just sending a few members of her army. Yet, for this bastard, she literally threw everything but to no avail. Thus, she decided to switch from offense to defense, waiting patiently on Felix's counterattack. Who knows, he might expose an opening in the process. Low-tiered legendary beasts were not mindless monsters, but actually had the intelligence of 7-year-old human, able to have a somewhat clear thought process. But the majority still relied on their instinct and senses for battles, totally ignoring using their brains. Mother Spider wasn't like the rest. She knew when to push and when to retreat. Felix wasn't throwing his azure bomb, even though she was clearly targetable, was because of so. He felt that if he rushed his offense and exposed his azure bomb to her, he wouldn't be able to get another chance if she dodged it successfully. Hence, the current staring contest between a beast and a human, a strange scene that rarely appeared in any game. Nervous and thrilled, the spectators all went quiet as well. After a short while, the tense atmosphere was suddenly broken by Felix throwing an acid bomb, leaving the azure bomb hidden in his pocket. He couldn't handle continuing this staring contest, as his energy kept being consumed each second due to his aura. After all, if he turned it off for even a split second, the spiderlings behind him wouldn't hesitate to jump on him. Poof! The acid bomb exploded exactly on the mother spider's head. It turned out she didn't even bother on dodging his attack, clearly confident in her poison resistance to handle Felix's inducements. Her confidence was well justified, as the acid inducement that terrorized everyone in the game, didn't even leave a single scratch on her body. Still unconvinced, Felix switched to sleepiness inducement and threw the bomb again. Just like before, the mother spider remained in her position glued on the wall, totally uncaring about the incoming white bomb. Poof! 0F***CKs given by the mother spider, as she breathed in the inducement out loud, making the spectators laugh their ass off at such blatant taunt. If it was just so, Zoe and the spectators wouldn't be that amused, but the mother spider kept tapping her 20 legs on the wall, clearly showing that she was not affected in the slightest by his poison. PFFFFF. Felix, you are getting mocked by a spider, said Asna, laughing out loud. Annoyed by the whole farce, Felix just kept standing on his position with his eyebrows twitching at the sight of the mother spider tapping her legs and pointing one at him, clearly provoking him to send another inducement. Ha, let's see how you gonna laugh after you absorb this. A smirk couldn't help but grace Felix's face, as brought out the azure bomb that was in his pocket. It was finally time to introduce the game-changing inducement that he prepared just for the mother spider. Neurotoxin inducement. He smiled smugly and threw the bomb, not bothering anymore if she would dodge or not. She truly saved him the effort by getting C.O.C.Ky in her poison resistance. Poof! Immediately after the bomb made contact with the mother spider, her legs which were tapping on the wall mockingly gave out and spread in a relaxed manner, like she was just doped. Zoe and the spectators choked on their own laughter after seeing the mother spider nose-diving rapidly with her legs flailing around without a single control on their movement. However, that didn't last for even 2 seconds before she regained her control and tried to stick back to the wall. Find authorized novels in, faster updates, better experience, please click number, _4882574129869197 for visiting. Poof. Too bad, a second bomb with the same inducement, nullified her efforts, forcing her to continue free-falling. Thud. Her body smashed into the metallic ground, sending a shockwave in the area. 10 meters in height wasn't enough to make her dizzy from the fall, thus she immediately jumped on all of her 20 legs, trying to return to her favorable position. But would Felix let her achieve so that easily after all the effort he had done? Not in a lifetime. Felix dashed towards her while firing continuously his azure bombs. He didn't stop even when the mother spider was clearly affected again by the inducement. As she leaned on the wall with her legs shaking, trying her best to stick to the surface and climb back. Unfortunately, bomb after bomb ruined her attempts at removing the numbness that she was feeling at the tips of her sechels. Felix chose the neurotoxin inducement just to counter those sechels, which were the source of her ability to have a firm grip on the wall. This inducement simply interferes with the function of the nervous system that carries signals around the body. Thus, each time the mother spider gave orders to her limbs to move, she only felt numbness and irritating tingling, like a colony of ants crawling over her body. The feeling was the same as someone hit his elbow hard with a solid object. That numbness and tingling sensation that followed after was what the mother spider was being affected by. The only difference between the two was that she felt that sensation throughout her entire body. One could only imagine the misery she was feeling now. Some may question that paralyze inducement had the exact effect, but it wasn't really that similar. After all, paralyze affected both the sensation and the movement of the body, meanwhile neurotoxin inducement affected only the sensation. If Felix had the option of using paralyze, he wouldn't hesitate for even a second. Unfortunately, paralyze bombs had a small dose to fully affect oversized bodies. After all, paralyze literally affected the entire body, interior and exterior, and 2 whiffs from a bomb weren't going to make it happen. Is it over already? Gasps came from the crowd, as they saw Felix's paralyze aura engulf the mother spider, who was leaning on the wall, still not giving up on climbing it. Sadly, the moment she stepped inside Felix's aura range, her limbs froze stiffly, twitching and quivering from time to time akin to an electric shock coursing through her body. She might be able to resist his bomb inducements, however, Felix's aura was an entirely different matter. Anyone who stepped inside was doomed to perish. Why aren't you tapping your feet anymore? Felix cracked his knuckles with a smug smile on his face, as he approached the immobilized mother spider step by step. Immediately after reaching her face, which was packed with red eyes teared in a disgusting manner, he recoiled a step back from the sight. Revolted, Felix curled up his mouth and began punching those eyes, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, bursting them off into a cloud of blood and sticky liquid akin to popping off bubble wraps. Due to his close distance, he wasn't spared from being showered by those liquids. Nonetheless, Felix just closed his eyes and mouth shut and continued his bloodthirsty attack, trying to end the battle as fast as possible. Who knows if the mother spider may pull off something outside of his plan. After all, just because she wasn't screaming in anguish due to the paralyzing effect, it didn't mean she wasn't feeling the pain and the horror of her approaching death. It was a known fact that beasts were most dangerous while being cornered to the limit. Mother Spider was no different. Felix sensed that she would do something to counterattack, or at least stop his offense. He just didn't know when and how, thus he had to make sure that he caused enough damage before so. Screech! 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 Speak of the devil and he shall appear, as the forgotten army of spiderlings, who were standing behind Felix outside of his aura, finally made a move. They kept yelling in agitation while running towards unexpectedly, each other. They collided and crashed against each other. Yet, every time it happened only one spiderling gets left behind. The other one totally disappeared like he just got devoured, and the size of the remaining spiderling was the best proof of so, as it grew from having a human adu.l.t's head size to having double that size. However, before this spiderling could even screech at successfully devouring his brother, he got instantly devoured by a bigger version of it. This process of merging kept happening over and over again, until only one gigantic spiderling was left behind. But honestly, at this point, it shouldn't be called spiderling anymore, but mother spider. A new and healthy version of it. Felix's senses weren't wrong in the slightest, as she truly had a hidden card he didn't read about or simply forgot. After all, he read its details long ago, and he was bound to forget an ability or two. It was not like the mother spider was the only beast he had read about, but just one of the tens of thousands. His memory was bound to fail him sooner or later. The only way to avoid so was by asking Asna to dive deep within his memories and bring all the details on the mother spider. Alas, she brutally rejected his simple request of helping him with the plan. Don't even mention asking her to do such a taxing task. Look behind you. Leader Emma shouted out loud until her voice went hoarse, hoping to warn Felix of the danger creeping behind his back. Yet, Felix was deaf to her warning, as he continued to smash eye after eye, totally engrossed in his bloodthirstiness. He was worried about the mother spider making a move, but for those cute spiderlings behind him, he utterly ignored them even though he heard their screeches. He simply assumed that it was the mother spider making her anguish heard using them. Plus he was confident that no matter what they threw at him it wouldn't affect him much. All of their attacks were absolutely useless against him. If they dashed inside his aura, they would get paralyzed. If they spit poison in his direction, they would simply disgust him. As for using their webs, he could simply corrode them with an acid bomb. Felix had everything calculated in his head. Too bad, he was absolutely clueless about the mother spider's ability to merge the spiderlings and create another version of herself. Chapter 148, The Mother Spider's Last Wail. Without making any noise, the second mother spider turned around and pointed her rear in Felix's direction. The spectators held their breaths in anticipation, not knowing what she was planning on doing. Was she going to make a cocoon out of him and drag him away from the main body? Or simply use her silk as a weapon and straightway kill him? Phew! Their thoughts were answered after seeing a long thick silky string, resembling a metal rod suddenly projected at Felix's back. It moved so fast, that Felix managed to move only an inch to the left by pure instinct he honed throughout the years. However, his reflexive dodge wasn't enough to get him out of this ambush unscathed. Arg! He groaned in pain while clutching the silky string, that just pierced his left shoulder slightly above his lung. His dodge wasn't totally useless after all. What the hell? Just as he tried to rearrange his thoughts after this deadly ambush, the rod that he was gripping suddenly pulled back, dragging him with it. Straight away, Felix unclutched his grip, not wanting to continue getting dragged like this. He knew that the mother spider must not leave his aura range no matter what. Or else, it would definitely escape upward, and this time there was no way in hell she would let herself get hit by the azure bomb. Ouch! F***ck me. Felix gritted his teeth and stood up with his hand pressuring tightly the gaping wound on his shoulder that was left behind by the rod. Furious at failing her ambush, the second mother spider screeched and sent another thick silky string towards his head this time. Felix rolled to the side awkwardly, dodging her attack by a hair strand. His movement was truly slower than he was at his peak, but it was only a natural outcome after getting gravely wounded like that. Every time he made a large movement, blood couldn't help but gush from the wound down his chest and back. This is probably Landlord's first time getting heavily wounded in his 2 games. Zoe exclaimed with a hint of surprise in her tone. She truly somewhat believed that Felix was an invincible and untouchable player from what she had seen so far. That notion was installed not just in her mind, but in every spectator who followed him through his 2 games. However, after seeing him constantly jump around with difficulty, trying his best to avoid the incoming barrage of those sharp strings, the spell that was clouding their minds was broken. Felix was but a normal player like everyone else. He was bound to get hurt and lose fights as well. Nothing shocking or surprising, especially when he was going against a legendary beast solo. He was literally fighting it using only 2 abilities, while 10 players, combining their strengths, couldn't even touch the mother spider. "Please do something." Emma kept on chewing her lips, hoping that Felix might turn the situation around. However, the odds were apparently against him. The second mother spider kept on pressuring him by releasing string after string. Sometimes she even mixed some webs in between, trying to capture him instead of killing him. She had only one thought in her mind, and that was to free her main body from his aura. Thus everything was on the table. Her abilities switch made it difficult for Felix to dodge and counterattack, as each time she threw a web, he had to respond instantly with an acid bomb, exploding it on his body, so when the web reached him it gets corroded immediately. If only he was allowed to switch aura inducement from paralyzing to acid, her attacks wouldn't have been causing such trouble for him. However, he couldn't do so, since the main body wouldn't take a single second before it relieved herself from the paralyze effect and climb upward. If that happened, Felix could forget about touching that legendary chest. He would probably find it difficult to even escape in one piece from being in a 2v1. Hence, he must figure something out quickly without using his aura. He was losing blood rapidly from the wound, and if the battle didn't finish ASAP, he would truly faint in the middle of the fight. Sign, I guess only one option left. Poof! Felix exploded another acid bomb on himself, as protection, and did double back handspring, reaching the mother spider's main body in a split second. He gritted his teeth over the sudden pain that assaulted him from his injury after aggrieving it with such a large movement. However, he soon ignored it and jumped on her body, dodging midair another string that was aiming at his thigh. The moment he landed on her body, he crouched between her abdomen and carapace, hiding thoroughly from the second mother spider's aggression. After all, she couldn't aim at him without the risk of hitting her main body instead. After seeing that it was impossible to kill Felix anymore, the second mother spider switched to throwing webs again, planning to cocoon him with the main body. Unfortunately, before the web even reached its target, Felix created 2 acid bombs with just a thought, leaving his hands free to strike the abdomen as he pleased. Poof! He exploded one bomb, countering the web successfully, and instantly created another, not daring to stop or care about his energy consumption anymore. The second mother spider was firing web after web continuously, clearly desperate on removing Felix on top of her main body. But who could blame her though? Bam! Bam! Felix's punches were literally causing cracks to appear on the hard shell of the abdomen. Felix didn't want to target this part of the body, even though it had her lungs and heart, was due to this hard shell that needed a minute or so of non-stop attacks to just make a small opening. Meanwhile, the head of the mother spider might have those disgusting eyes all over it, still, its defenses weren't even close to its counterpart. That's why Felix only targeted her abdomen after being left without a better option. He knew that his acid bombs must keep exploding periodically and constantly on top of him, creating a mini aura that acted as a protective shield against those webs. But the cost of doing so was definitely going to put a dent in Felix's energy tank. He didn't want to throw everything on this battle and be left N.A.K.E.D after it. Who knows if a squad of 4 or 5 decided to gang up on him after seeing his messed up shoulder. Especially, if he met with hardcore players participating in the bet. There was no way in hell they would walk away from Felix, since killing him was equivalent to getting a new chance in emerging as the winner in the wager. In the end, he still went for it, and currently, it was working like a charm. As the second mother spider was on the verge of losing her mind after seeing that her main body's abdomen shell was getting fractured from the middle, exactly above her heart. The second mother spider was getting agitated because she felt that her main body's shell wasn't going to last for long. Yet, she could do nothing to stop it. Heck, she couldn't even cocoon her main body and drag it away, as the mini acid aura was covering both of them. Screech! Screech! She merely kept moving in circles around the aura and firing her webs, hoping that his mini aura had a slight opening that she could take advantage of. Unfortunately, Felix made sure that it was tight-proof, covering both him and the mother spider fully. Bam! Shatter! After consistently hitting the same spot until his knuckles began to bleed, Felix finally managed to shatter the shell, breaking it apart and exposing her heart that was beating at 186 beats/min or so. It was obvious that the mother spider was scared shitless about her fast approaching death, and her furious screech turning into pitiful wails were enough as proof of so. Although Felix heard those wails loud and clear, he still gripped his fist tightly and lifted it up expressionlessly. Ba-am. Without a single ounce of hesitation, he brought it down fiercely, striking the long tube-shaped heart that was extending from one end of the abdomen to the other. Screech! The mother spider made her pained cry heard using her second body after her heart burst into a shower of blood and liquid. However, her wail didn't last for long, before her second body disappeared into light particles, marking the deactivation of her ability. Awestruck, Zoe and the spectators watched Felix withdrawing his bloodied fist from the inside of her body and raise it above his head for a split second as a celebration, still dripping with blood. The battle was finally over. Whoa! Landlord **king monster. Holy shit! Who took a picture of his pose? Send it to me please. Me as well, I am going to use it as my screensaver. He actually slew a legendary tier 2 beast solo. Landlord! 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 The silence that was deafening the stadium before immediately was replaced by chaos breaking out after seeing the battle finally conclude in such an astonishing manner. The spectators weren't the only ones who were losing their shit, as the VIP viewers, who were part of clans, agencies, leagues, clubs, or even high-ranked players coming to relax by watching a lower ELO game, were tongue-tied and mind-blown by Felix's victory. Before the battle even began, they were even more pessimistic about his chances of slaying the mother spider than Zoe's. They believed that he was biting more than he could chew after they saw him struggle to win against the terror serpent. Yet, it never occurred in their minds that Felix's abilities were pure counter to the mother spider's elements. His acid inducement utterly destroyed her silk element, while his poison immunity allowed him to nullify the mother spider's most iconic poison completely. Thus, the mother spider was handicapped before the battle even began. However, none of them disparaged his achievement of killing her solo due to this, as they knew that countering others and getting countered was a natural outcome in every battle. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number S last whale _4889423260529397 for visiting. Hence, no one could rob his victory. Not even those high-ranked players. Chapter 149, Giving Up on the Championship. The Green Mamba clan elder Brandy was sitting as well in a VIP room, spectating Felix from the moment the game started. You forced me here, telling me that he would definitely underperform in his second game. Elder Brandy turned his head, staring at the young man covered in green scales, and chuckled, Is this what you call underperforming, Mirage? Tisk, he wasn't bad, I give him that. He is worthy to be an inner member of our clan. Mirage clicked his tongue in irritation over being teased like this by his teacher. Still, the game is not over yet. He gave a half shrug with a smirk and added, his high-profile hunting already made the participants in the wager join forces against him. After he opens up that golden chest, they would definitely rush to snap his head. Indeed, what's even worse is that his condition is not optimal. The elder sighed, he must have used most of his energy by now, leaving him exposed to their aggression. Don't forget his wound, elder. Mirage quickly added. Elder Brandy didn't respond, he simply shook his head lightly, as he gazed at Felix jumping from the mother spider who was breaking into light particles, leaving behind a number shimmering with golden light. 1000 GP. Mirage mumbled the number under his breath after his eyes were drawn to its blinding light. A whopping 1k GP from just slaying the beast. He couldn't imagine how many points the chest that was guarded by it had in it. A hint of jealousy and envy couldn't help but begin to build up in his heart after he calculated Felix's total points. 6,700 GP without even opening the golden chest. F***ing hell, I don't even have half of it in my possession. To actually be a high-tiered gold player, but have less GP than a player on his second game ever, was truly a bit hard to swallow. Don't get attached to them, since you won't live long to use them. Mirage smirked and switched his vision to the middle of the maze, eyeing a gathering of 25 players or such, just standing around a sealed-shut gate silently and patiently, resembling a bunch of guardian statuses. One could only wonder what they were up to, standing near the maze exit like that without battling for the right to be the first to enter it. The entire situation screamed with danger. Yet, Felix had absolutely no idea about any of this, as he simply walked towards the glittering golden chest with a hand gripping tightly his shoulder, applying pressure to minimize any further bleeding. Although the mother spider left a gaping hole in his shoulder, Felix wasn't worried that he would bleed to the death, since his body recovery speed was enough to close the hole if enough proper rest was given. Ultimately, he was an awakened human, who enjoyed some physical perks of the beast he merged with, such as enhanced recovery. It might not be as good as unlocking an ability for it, but it was better than human slow recovery speed. That's why Felix's previous wounds caused by the sandstorm weren't giving him any problems during the fight, as they got healed properly over time. All awakened humans enjoyed those perks as well, just like in the case of Mastermania. Any commoner who had their body skin melted by Felix's acid aura would need concentrated care in a hospital to just stand up again. Meanwhile, Mastermania was seen walking normally like he wasn't exposed to such an attack. If recovery speed was this good for lower stage bloodliners, one could only guess how good it would be for higher stage bloodliners. Are you going to continue hunting? Asna suddenly asked curiously. Nope. Felix shook his head, I am done for now. My energy has reached the red bar. I doubt I would be able to kill another epic beast with it. He tried to shrug his shoulders like he always did, but pain instantly assaulted him, giving him a reminder of his wound. Plus, my condition is truly not optimal for any more fights. I see, I guess you give up on the championship then. She said. Championship, hey. Felix smiled bitterly while leaning against the chest. If he wasn't hurt like this and had only 20% of energy, he might have gone for the exit now and blocked any moron who tried to use it. Alas, he would rather chill in his place and wait until the game ends than go risk getting himself killed by aggressively hunting others. Felix knew that based on his current condition, he was nowhere near achieving championship unless by some miracle no one managed to find the exit throughout this long period. But Felix wasn't that optimistic about it happening. He was glad that the game was delayed until he secured the legendary chest. He couldn't ask for more. Although, not winning the game would deny him from having a wish and delay him from reaching the gold rank faster, still, Felix was more than satisfied by his earnings in this game. 6,700 GB without opening the chest, or counting the GP of the players participating in the wager. He was damn certain that his total GP was going to reach 20k or surpass it. So, as much as it saddened him to give up on the championship, he wasn't really that annoyed about it happening. He already achieved the target he set before the game. For now, he just wished to take a break and relax a bit until the game ends. He fought for way too long during this game. Well, I don't mind stopping now, I had enough fun. Asna stretched on the bed with a satisfied smile. I'm glad Felix smiled as well. However, it was soon replaced with a grin, as he tapped on the chest with his leg, sending shivers down the spine of the spectators, who knew what was coming. I guess it's time to open this big boy. Just as Felix raised his leg, planning to kick the chest wide open under the cries and wails of the despairing crowd, his AP bracelet suddenly vibrated and displayed a notification, alarming him about the upcoming third shuffle alarm. The timing was truly perfect, as Felix spent about 20 minutes to reach the chest and the rest was spent during the battle. He was quite lucky to end the fight before the third shuffle, otherwise, he would have been forced to give up on slaying the mother spider. Damn, that was a close call. He sighed in relief and closed off the alarm notification. He withdrew his leg and leaned back on the chest again, pausing his attempt at opening it up. The spectators didn't know why he stopped, nonetheless, they were happy that the inevitable was delayed for a few more seconds. They truly couldn't handle seeing that magnificent golden chest get ruined by his thuggish personality as well. Alas, it is what it is. Meanwhile, Zoe knew exactly why he stopped, as she also made alarm for the alarm, to not get embarrassed over forgetting about the shuffles again. However, she was still confused about his reason for doing so, since opening the chest wouldn't take him even a split second. There was no need to wait until the shuffle passes. However, Felix, unbothered by the resounding shuffle alarm that just went off, kept leaning against the chest casually. Peep. 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 What the hell is up to? Confused, she kept switching vision between him and the reverse countdown on the large screen. 7,6,5, 3,2. Just as the countdown was about to reach its end, Felix swiftly turned around and kicked the chest wide open. Immediately he froze in his kicking position, as the maze began to shuffle its walls, marking the start of the third shuffle. However, no one gave a glance at the walls, which were dancing around the maze harmoniously, separating into halves and connecting to each other randomly, yet with a sense of systematicness. No one paid attention to them, as their focus was captured and entrapped by sudden golden fireworks exploding in the maze's sky. An explosion so big, that its bright lights displayed the player's smallest hair skin. The entire maze was brightened up under those fireworks, adding extra beauty to the walls shuffling around continuously. The spectators were stunned speechless by the high-profile way of announcing Felix's successful feat of slaying a legendary beast. They knew that the fireworks were going to be a pleasant and quite admiring view, however, they never expected to be this astonishing. Not in the slightest. Meanwhile, the players were actually the ones who were dumbstruck the most by the sudden explosion. They were just preparing to take advantage of those free seconds of scouting that the shuffle was about to give them, yet those fireworks exploding exactly before the last alarm peep, removed any thought of scouting ahead, as their eyes couldn't help but get drawn to the bright light above them, resembling a sun. Shock, disbelief, confusion, dread, and fear, bone-chilling fear, sending goosebumps coursing through their skin. A tide of varied emotions washed over them immediately after seeing a sentence written boldly and artistically in golden characters, like heaven sending down a decree to mortals like them. Landlord has obtained 3,000 GP from a legendary chest. They couldn't believe what their eyes were feeding them, and they honestly didn't dare to. If Felix merely killed another epic beast, they honestly would have simply either respected his strength or envied him. However, when legendary was written boldly in caps, to further highlight the rank of the beast he slew, they had no thoughts of respect nor feelings of envy. The only thing they felt was fear, fear of actually playing with such a humanoid creature without their realization. Slaying a legendary beast solo. Not in their wildest dreams, would they have believed that one of them was capable of doing it. Heck, they weren't even confident in achieving that feat by allying together. Yet here they are, seeing with their own eyes, Felix doing what they thought was impossible. A sudden deafening silence descended in the maze. The spectators were speechless by the fireworks' beauty, while the players weren't able to speak, move, or express their overwhelming emotions. Only their eyes and thoughts were moving non-stop, and each had their own thoughts and views over the announcement. Damn it! How could he kill a legendary beast alone? Father definitely going to compare my battle with his. Annoyed, Princess Bird huffed through her nostrils, bastard, continuously making my life hell. If before, she had a chance to talk her way out of her trashy performance, now she was absolutely doomed. After all, in the eyes of everyone she and Felix, both had legendary bloodlines, yet he slew 2 epic beasts and 1 legendary. Meanwhile, she slew only 1 epic beast with extreme difficulty. There was just nowhere to compare their results. Hence, her irritation was quite understandable. Just like before, the shuffle didn't take more than 10 seconds before the walls finished rearranging themselves randomly. In the very center of the maze, a wide-open circular space connected to 4 paths, each leading to the 4 cardinal directions, north, east, west, and south, was packed with 25 players all standing stiffly around a medium-sized closed gate made of the same alloy as the walls, silver and smooth. However, it was shining brightly like a beacon. It was hard to miss. This was the exit of the maze. A closed gate that had to be pushed open in order to clinch the win. From its height and width, it was obvious that pushing it was going to take quite some effort. The players, who were frozen stiffly near it, abruptly regained control over their bodies. However, their eyes were still gazing at the announcement that was fading gradually. Chapter 150, Planning to Kill Landlord. No matter how many beasts you kill, or how many points you collect, I will make sure that you never get to use them, Landlord. Solar Mist pushed his glasses upward and murmured with a hint of greed, as he stared at the drifting 3000 GP in the air, we need a change of plans. Calm and collected, he lowered his head, not bothering any more with the announcement. His emotions were completely sealed behind his stoic expression. Guys, enough staring at the sky like morons and pay attention here. He clapped his hand twice, trying to break off the tense atmosphere that was caused by Felix's mind-boggling achievement. Who are you calling a moron? Pure Muscle lowered his head as well and stared right in Solar Mist's eyes. Know your place, Mr. Solar. We might have a contract forbidding us from acting against each other. But, the next time you insult me, this will be your fate. Pure Muscle pointed his hand towards Solar Mist, and gripped his fist tightly, making the air inside his fist explode. The players surrounding them gasped at such a pure demonstration of overwhelming physical strength. Pure Muscle didn't use a single ability to cause such an effect. I apologize for my tongue slip. Surprisingly, Solar Mist didn't lash back at Pure Muscle's threat, he simply bowed his head slightly with a composed expression. King sissy, can you act like a man for once? Pure Muscle clicked his tongue. However, Solar acted deaf to such a blatant insult. In his eyes, there were more important matters to discuss than to argue with this bushy gorilla. He ignored the hidden sneers and scoffs he was hearing from the players in front of him and said with a polite smile, guys, as you have just seen, Landlord wasn't targeting the exit of the maze like we predicted he would after slaying the second epic beast. He sighed, who would have expected that he would actually continue his hunting journey, and nevertheless, target legendary beasts that we treated like a plague in the maze, avoiding them at all costs. The majority of the players who were standing around him, all flinched or shivered at hearing Felix's achievement again. Until now, they still couldn't get over it and probably would never do so. Slaying a legendary beast solo was no joking matter. Thus, second thoughts on participating in ambushing Felix were beginning to pop up in their minds. After all, the only reason they even accepted the hardcore players' plan of killing Felix was because they were under a strict slave contract. In other words, they were under their mercy. Felix assumed that it was due to luck that the game was prolonged beyond his expectations, helping him slay beast after beast unhindered. However, in reality, the game was supposed to end right after he slew the Terror Serpent. A full 40-minute delay was caused by one group, made of 4 players. Solar Mist, Hound Stench, Spirit Visage, and Pure Muscle. They were the first ones to find the maze's exit. Of course, it wasn't at the same time, as Spirit Visage made it first and was followed by the others gradually. They didn't give up on the wager as the rest did after seeing Felix's second announcement of slaying the Terror Serpent. Instead, they all had one thought in their minds, and that was to stop hunting for beasts and sprint towards the maze exit, hoping to meet up with Felix by chance and kill him. That was the only way to gain another chance at winning the bet. However, it turned out that Felix wasn't the one who they met next to the maze exit, but each other. The moment their eyes made contact, they immediately knew that each of them had the same thought. Thus, instead of fighting for no reason, they made an alliance to kill Felix. Solar Mist, who proposed the rule of having no allies before, explicitly mentioned forbidding allying together against beasts, and not players. This meant that allying together was within the wager rules. No one knows if Solar Mist planned to leave such a loophole, or it was merely by chance. Whatever it was, an alliance was created after stamping a contract, forbidding them from acting against each other, at least before Felix died. That being said, they had absolutely no clue where Felix's current location was. Hence, instead of trying to find him inside this endless labyrinth, they decided to wait for him to come by himself. After all, the first thought that should pop up on Felix's mind after finishing hunting the beasts was to sprint towards the exit and block anyone trying to win the game by using it. Find authorized novels in faster updates, better experience. Please click number _490815785250900081 for visiting. One should never forget that the player with the highest points after the game duration passes would be the champion. Felix, if he didn't have the golden scroll pointing at the legendary chest, would have done exactly what they have assumed. So, their plan might not be the best, but at least it had a quite high probability of succeeding. Too bad, they waited and waited, yet the only ones who were showing up constantly were players who weren't part of the wager, finally managing to find the exit. The first thought that came up to Pure Muscle's mind was to kill them, in order to protect the exit. The last thing they wanted was for a total trash player to end up winning the game, while they won absolutely nothing. However, before Pure Muscle made a move, Solar Mist proposed another idea, a wicked idea of capturing those players and forcing them to abide to their wishes. In other words, helping them ambush Felix when he shows up. Solar Mist wasn't a stupid proud player who thought that he would be able to kill Felix even after hearing that he slew 2 epic beasts solo. No, even if didn't hear those announcements, he would never underestimate an opponent. Thus, he would always use his brain to seek the easiest and most efficient plan to fulfill his desires. Using those players like slaves was but one way to demonstrate his way of thinking and acting. However, his thought process rubbed Pure Muscle in the wrong way, as he assumed that Solar Mist lacked confidence in their collected strength to kill even one player. However, the rest of the party didn't share the same view as Pure Muscle. In fact, they supported Solar Mist's plan 100%, as they believed that having more players around them would only turn beneficial. No one would say no to free help. Ultimately, Pure Muscle's disagreement over such a cowardly behavior was overruled based on their voting contract. So, they began their capturing plan, by laying traps and ambushes around the maze's exit. Any player who got captured by their ways received only 2 choices from the party: 1, sign a contract, entailing that inside the maze his life would be under their wishes and orders. The contract turned void either by death or after the game ends. Or, they could choose dying straight away with a bit of dignity. This was the version the spectators had knowledge of, the version they saw and heard with their own eyes. Of course, everyone chose to sign the contract, since even though it was a slave contract, Solar Mist promised them that killing Felix and defending the maze exit was all they wanted from them. Nothing more, nothing less. Though, he didn't add that in the contract, it was merely a verbal promise. Nevertheless, the players weren't stupid to get themselves killed just to protect a bit of their dignity. In their eyes, they had done things way worse in the previous games to mind their actions in public anymore. In the end, the party around the maze's exit kept getting bigger and bigger, as it grew by 2s and 3s each time a player or a party lucked out on the exit. This carried on for 30 minutes until the party had 25 players, all standing near the exit, doing nothing but waiting for Felix to appear. Alas, he never did. Only now did they understood why so. The F***er was hunting a legendary beast, while they were standing like morons for no reason. He was never going to come and probably never planned on doing so. Solar Mist knew that time wasn't on their side to continue hoping that he magically shows up. Heck, after seeing that Felix slew a legendary beast, he was certain that Felix gave up on the championship. Thus, he wanted to change the plan as fast as possible, and figure something else with his party. Unfortunately, he didn't expect that the majority would quiver fearfully at him mentioning Felix. Don't you dare have second thoughts on bailing out. Solar Mist narrowed his eyes and threatened, if you don't want to end up getting humiliated right now and right here, you better behave yourselves. Disgruntled noises began to arise within the group at such a blatant threat. However, that was as much as they did to sound their displeasure. As for rioting or crying out loud, they didn't want to get ordered to be stripped nude on a live stream as a punishment for disobeying their orders. It happened a few times already to not get the jest that Solar Mist and his crew meant business. Hence, they could only lower their heads and wish that Felix never shows up to ruin those bastards' plans. Do you guys have a plan to salvage this situation? Solar Mist said calmly to his main party, unbothered by their hateful glares. After a couple of minutes in utter silence, Hound Stench's gruff voice resounded in the area, I have a way to find him.